baby, what you want me to do? You got me dizzy and now I sing the blues down Jimmy Reed Highway.
Call this hearing on November 1st, 2021, public hearing for the City of Tampa's Architectural Review Commission to order. Welcome. I'm Susan Klaus-Smith. I am acting as the chair tonight. I am the vice chair for the commission. I'm also an architect. If you're here to present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project, and the commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation. Your project should be presented in the following order: the site plan, the elevations, architectural details, and wall sections. The staff will then present their staff report, and then we, the commission, will then ask for public comment. Following the presentation and public comment, the commissioners will be asking questions in the same order as the presentation was given. When you do come up, please state and spell your name clearly. If you are here to speak for or against a project, your time will be limited to 3 minutes. So take some time now to summarize your comments, because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. And then following public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed, and the only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based on the city ordinance, chapter 27 of the city zoning code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of Interior standards, Historic Preservation Development Review, or HPDRC comments, and the testimony given at the public hearing. Please note that the ARC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owner agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and or approvals. If you haven't already done so, please silence your cell phones, and I will ask my fellow commissioners who are here tonight to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Sutton. I'm a registered architect. I hold also the architectural historian chair for this commission.
Brent Taylor, I'm a building contractor.
Dan Myers, I also am an architect.
And tonight we have with us our legal staff, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel, Dennis Fernandez, Ron Vila, and Beverly Jusek. I got it right. And then we will proceed to the minutes. Yes, sorry. We have before us the minutes from the October 4th and October 6th hearing. If I could hear a motion of acceptance, or...
I move that we accept the minutes for the Architectural Review Commission public hearing meeting of Monday, October 4th, 2021, and Wednesday, October 6th, 2021, as presented.
I second the motion.
All in favor, state aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architectural Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Welcome to this evening's hearing. Just a couple of brief announcements. We do have a full agenda, so we do want to get underway quickly. I do have the administrative approvals for October 2021, which have been provided to the clerk for the record. And I did want to announce that we will be holding the second portion of our November cycle on November 3rd at 6 p.m. And we have, at this point, a quorum for that meeting, so we should be having that without a problem. And just a friendly reminder, just to keep in mind that beginning in January of 2022, these meetings will be beginning at 5:30 p.m. So I'll be reminding you of that up until that time. And with that, I believe we can move now to conflicts of interest and ex parte communication disclosure.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. Will the Commissioners please state whether or not they have any conflicts of interest regarding any of the items that are on the agenda?
I have none.
Additionally, will the commissioners please state whether or not they've had any ex parte communications regarding any of the items on the agenda?
None.
Not aye.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Avila. I'm staff with Historic Preservation, and moving down the agenda to continuations. We have one that's reflected on the agenda, which is ARC 21-406 for the address of 203 West Vern Street and 202 West Beach Place. This was requested by the agent to be continued to the Monday, January 3rd, 2022 public hearing at 5:30 PM. Can I get a motion for that, please?
I move that ARC 21-406 for the property located at 203 West Vern Street and 202 West Beach Place be continued to the Architectural Review Commission public hearing scheduled for Monday, January 3rd, 2022 at 5:30 PM.
I'll second.
All in favor, please state aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, seeing none, the motion carries.
Also, one continuation that is not reflected on the agenda, that I was in discussion with the owner until about 5:30 today, and there, I was supposed to receive an email, but I had to leave the office to set up, obviously. And that's for ARC, and this is the first case reflected on the agenda, which is ARC 21-343. This is for the address of 504 East New Orleans Avenue. This is coming in for a certificate of appropriateness. The next available date that we have, if this is continued, is to the January 5th, 2022 public hearing at 5:30 PM. And if we could get a motion for that, please.
Excuse me, Kamaria, is that the request from the applicant to continue it?
That was the discussion we have. I did not receive any correspondence, but that's the next available date that we have.
Okay. So that's January 5th
Correct.
at 5:30 PM. We just need to have a motion to
Yep.
reflect that.
I move to grant a continuance in the case of ARC 21-343 to the January 5th meeting at 5:30.
I will second that motion.
All in favor, please state aye and raise your hand indicating so aye.
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 Those seeing none, continue, the motion passes. Move on to the first case.
Before we go to the first case, let's move to swear-ins. Everybody that wishes to testify, please stand up and raise your right hand. Ms. Juzak will swear us in, including staff.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. Moving to the first case this evening, which is ARC 21-364. This is for the address of 818 South Edison Avenue. This is in the Hyde Park Historic District. There are a couple of structures on this property that are contributing that date back to 1920. The current zoning classification is RS60. They have two requests this evening, and I have spoke to the agent. I think for the ease of the presentation, if we could split them up. There's a demolition attached to the contributing accessory structure. Let's review the information first for the demolition. If the demolition passes, then we could go into the certificate of appropriateness for new construction for an accessory structure with site improvements. Attached to your staff report on page 3 is the Tampa City of Ordinances that you will be reviewing this application with. It's chapter 27, 116F, 1 through 3. And then also in your packet, you have the demolition report that you can follow along with. If we could move to my screen and I could do the photo essay, please. Thank you very much. The first illustration is a Sanborn map that dates back to 1929. Property in question is highlighted in the green shaded area. We're focusing on the accessory structure. The accessory structure is indicated in 1929 as the accessory structure that we will be reviewing this evening. The primary structure faces Edison. You see Bay Shore towards the east and the south, and then you have Inman to the north. There is an alley that runs north and south behind the property. This is just a current overhead shot. Once again, you have Edison, you have South Boulevard to the east, you have Delaware as a point of reference to the west, and then Bay Shore Boulevard to the south and to the east. This is showing the accessory structure as it sits today. Just to get you familiar with the primary structure, a couple shots. This is the front facade of the primary structure. This is the south elevation that flanks the Ribbon Drive as it leads to the accessory structure. This is the north elevation. And moving around to the rear. This is some of the surrounding properties. And focusing back on what the request is, this is the detached accessory structure at the end of the Ribbon Drive. It's a two-story structure. A little closer shot of the primary elevation for the accessory structure. This is looking at the interior shot. And you see the proximity to from the accessory structure to the abutting accessory structure to the neighbor. Part of the challenges for this accessory structure that it does encroach over the property line, and the agent will address those items with you. But the telephone pole is really an indication with that when we're in the field to kind of show where the structures are at. They're placed on the property lines usually. And it shows how the overhangs encroach. This is looking at the condition of the alleys. This is in one direction. It is a heavily traveled alley. And just turn around looking in the other direction. At this time, this concludes the photo presentation, and I'll have the agent address the board at this time. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Peter Carlin. I'm the agent for this the project on this property, and I'm also the contractor. Unfortunately, part of our team is missing tonight. We had an architect come down with COVID last week, so she was not able to attend, and then the structural engineer also got sick over the weekend. So I have no problem answering questions for the architectural part of the presentation, and we do have the report from the engineer, so I feel like I can answer questions if needed. So I'm going to start with a brief history of the project. The owners, Peter and Alexandra Wu, approached me back in 2019 about to add a addition onto the back of their house, and it also included renovating their detached garage. So we started the design process, and somewhere in 2020, when we were trying to get a permit, we were informed that the accessory structure encroached upon city property. So after a lot of deliberation, we kind of peeled that part of the project off and created a separate project and just did the addition, which was approved and is under construction. So we went through an application for encroachment, and it did not pass because TECO had issues with the overhead power lines. So I'll get into a little bit more detail about that, but that's the reason why we're here for a demolition, because we could not get an encroachment for this building, which prevents us from properly renovating it. So that's kind of the time frame. I mean, that's where we are today. So I'm going to kind of use the chapter 27 as a guide for my presentation and just go down the different questions. So So first, I'll probably start with giving you a view of the site plan. The before site plan, and I'm not quite sure how to do this, Ron. Let's see. Upside down. Sure it is. So you can kind of see right here that this is the two-story accessory structure, and it encroaches approximately about a foot or 0.8 feet into the alley beyond the property line. And there's also quite a few overhead power lines going over it, which I'm going to show you some pictures of that. Here's a picture of showing the the power lines that go over, and it's quite a few high voltage lines. So with that, I'll show a different view, just to put it in the context. Okay, so starting with the burden of proof, alternatives to demolition or relocation, such as planned development districts. So because of the, I'm going to just read this. The owners of 818 Edison first attempted to include the renovation of the existing conforming garage with the permit for a new rear addition to the property. During the permit review process, the owners were advised that the existing garage encroached on city property. Because the cost of rehabilitating and stabilizing the structure exceeded the amount allowed, the owners were advised to then submit a request for authorization of encroachment. As an alternative to demolition, the owners filed for the authorization of encroachment with the City of Tampa so that the structure could be legally kept in its current location. This was the owner's primary goal at the start. The existing accessory structure encroaches beyond the property line on the alley side. Regarding the results of the encroachment request, there were no objections except TECO. Their condition was that all primary overhead electrical lines which run directly over the roof of the accessory structure would need to be relocated underground, leading to an economic hardship that will be addressed below. Please refer to Exhibit A for the encroachment application, responses from the utility companies, and surveys showing the encroachment of the existing conforming structure into the alley. Ron, do the commissioners have all of that paperwork? Okay. I don't think I need to kind of go through the whole encroachment application. I mean, it's just a form that we filled out. And I've also submitted all the results back from the utility companies. And you'll see in there that the one from TECO was the one that was objected to. Part B, whether the landmark or building or structure can be retained on the site. In its current location, because the authorization for encroachment was not granted without conditions, which in turn causes an economic hardship, the existing accessory structure cannot be kept in its current location on the site. Additionally, because the existing structure encroaches onto city property, there are sensitive hardships with existing utilities that will cause ongoing hardships with the structure being kept in its current location or any proposed renovations. The overhead power lines pose a direct danger to any construction workers performing any renovations to the existing structure. Simply working on the structure with the proximity of the power lines is a violation of TECO and OSHA safety requirements. Please refer to Exhibit A. Without extensive renovations and stabilization, the structure cannot be kept in its current location. Part C, whether relocating the landmark or building or structure is appropriate and feasible. The accessory structure is in danger of collapse in its current state. while rehabilitating the foundation of the structure is feasible, rehabilitating and moving the structure is not feasible. Please refer to Exhibit B, the report from the licensed engineer and pictures of the severe leaning of the structure. Based on the report from the licensed engineer, the structure cannot be relocated. And I'm going to show you a couple pictures because the actual building has gotten worse since we first were approached by the owners.
Could I ask that you show all the images from that exhibit, because our copy is really
Yes,
dark, really
I have
black.
good pictures.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's the first picture, kind of like a faraway picture. And you can kind of see the bend on the right side. And then I actually had one of my workers hold up a level, and you can see that, over 8 feet or 10 feet, there's quite a significant lean on the structure. And here's a close-up view of that, the level. And then I also did that same thing on the other side, so you can kind of see that the whole structure is racking on the first floor. The second floor is kind of staying plumb, but the first floor is racking, and part of the reasons for that, aside from a pretty poor foundation, is a structural I-beam that was installed, I don't know when and by whom, but it's something that's the engineer believes is causing a good part of this problem. And these are just pictures of that I-beam that was put in there illegally, probably without a permit. And then I'm also going to show you a couple pictures of the existing foundation. And you'll see that this structure was probably just walls that were sitting on a slab, and somebody came back in and poured concrete over the whole base of the wall. So those studs cannot really be replaced without completely removing the foundation. And here's another view of that. Let me kind of get into the engineer's report. So the bullet points that I wanted to kind of bring up from the report, which you guys have a picture of, is that there's an excessive shift in the first floor walls, which I've shown you on the pictures. The existing steel beam is not properly installed, and the bearing ends are not completely structurally adequate. The construction of the first floor wall framing and foundation needs significant...
Mr. Carlin, could you push that over so we can read
Oh, I'm
all the way
sorry.
to the end? That's okay. Thank
Yep.
you. It's hard to know sometimes.
And there has been a drastic increase in the shift in the wall since the initial inspection in February of 2020. So unfortunately, the engineer recommended that the owners vacate the building because it was unsafe, in his opinion. And you can kind of read down that he also does not believe that the structure can be moved, because that was the original intent, was to try to remove the entire first floor of the structure, because the footings and the walls all have to be replaced. But the fear is that if we take the entire first floor out and somehow try to shore it up, there's going to be a good chance that it was going to fall. So, I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it was going to be extremely difficult because it's already in a precarious state. So there would have to be significant shoring involved just to salvage the second floor of this structure. Okay, moving on to Part D. Whether the applicant has the ability to build the proposed new construction within a reasonable period of time if the application is approved. Yes, if granted approval to build a new historically compatible structure, the applicant will be able to build the new structure in a reasonable period of time. Generation of building plans and submitting for a permit would happen immediately. Part E, whether the demolition is justified as an economic hardship. The owner was prepared to fully renovate and structurally stabilize the existing accessory structure if allowed to keep the structure in its current location. The condition from TECO that the power lines over the structure be relocated underground causes a direct hardship for the owner. TECO estimates that the cost to relocate the power lines to be in the range of $15,000, which I believe you have a copy of email that I was sent for that. The additional cost, along with extensive costs to renovate, stabilize, and move the existing structure, are more than the owners are willing to accommodate. Additionally, having to work on any renovations with the overhead power lines above the structure will not only be unsafe, but will require unreasonable safety precautions for construction workers. These precautions will be very expensive and lead to additional economic hardships. There is also risk that because the structure encroaches on city property, the planned foundation rehabilitation for the existing structure could possibly affect existing city utilities. And I think there's sewer lines back in the alley and also water lines. In summary, because the cost to rehabilitate and stabilize the current existing conforming structure is more than the cost of building a new structure, this poses a direct financial hardship to the owner of the property. And I believe you have a copy of the estimates that I put together. And I'll put those up on the screen. So this is page, can I zoom out? Okay, so I did a comparison estimate here. The left column is renovating the structure, and the right column is building a new structure. And you'll see that the primary differences in costs are in the demolition section. And you can see that I put in a $16,000 estimated number to shore up the building under demolition. And then, once you start getting into, exterior finished carpentry and all the finishes, the cost remain the same, but the stabilizing of the structure, shoring it up, and then the added cost from TECO kind of push the cost of renovating this structure higher than what it would be to build a new structure. Part 3, economic hardship. On applications for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish, the ARC shall consider the question of economic hardship for the applicant. I'm not going to read all that. I'll just go into my response to that. The contractors produce comparison estimates showing the cost difference between rehabilitation, renovation of the existing contributing accessory structure and building a new conforming structure. Please refer to Exhibit C. Considering that the existing structure cannot be feasibly relocated based on the report from the engineer, the rehabilitation/renovation would be performed in the current location. In order to stabilize the existing structure from failure, the entire foundation and first floor bearing walls, including all exterior walls, would need to be completely replaced. This would require significant and costly structural shoring and bracing to essentially remove the entire first floor and support the second floor in its current location so that the first floor replacement could be completed. The cost estimates show the different costs associated with this work as compared to building a new conforming structure. One major cost with rehabilitating/renovating the contributing structure is the requirement by TECO to bury the power lines of $15,000. An additional hardship with keeping the structure in its current location, and because this encroaches on the City of Tampa property, would be the possible damage to existing utilities for replacing the foundation. In summary, because the cost to rehabilitate and stabilize the current existing conforming structure is more than the cost of building a new structure, this poses a direct financial hardship to the owner on this property. B, a report from a licensed engineer or architect with experience in rehabilitation as to the structural soundness of the structure and its suitability for relocation and or rehabilitation. You can refer to the engineer's report for that. Part C, the estimated market value of the property. Please refer to Exhibit E from Tampa Home Styles. I believe that the estimated market value of this project would be, they're estimating that the current value of the home is $1,325,000. Part D, an estimate from an, or did I already read that one? Sorry. Part D is referring to Exhibit C, which is the estimate I've already presented. The amount paid for the property was $1.1 million on 12/11/2019. There was no relationship between the buyer and seller, no financing between buyer and seller. Part F, this property does not produce income. The principal balance on the mortgage is $905,982.86. We do have a copy of an appraisal report that was attached as Exhibit Exhibit D. Any listing of the property for sale or rent, price asked, and other offers received, if any, in the previous 2 years. It was listed for sale for $1.15 million in 8/2019, and the price was changed to $1.14 million. The assessed value in 2020 is $900,960. In 2021, the assessed value was $913,573. And then the real estate taxes were $17,039.90. In 2021, it was $17,169.41. The owner are individuals, Alexandra Fisher and Peter Wu. And that kind of completes my responses to Section 27. I just kind of want to summarize that we have tried quite a few avenues to try to save this structure, and we kept hitting a lot of roadblocks. And at the end, it ended up costing quite a bit of money and became unfeasible. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I'll be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. In evaluating this application, we look for the completeness, that it is consistent with Chapter 27, 116F 1 through 3, and the information that we received and we reviewed complies with that section of the code. I would advise the board at this time to focus on the demolition and ask any questions associated with the demolition, and then have a motion on that. And then we could pick up, if the motion is successful, on the certificate of appropriateness.
Dennis, at this time, we do have public comment opportunity, correct, on the demolition? Yeah. Correct? So we'll open the hearing now to public comment. You do have 3 minutes. If you'd like to speak and you have not been sworn in, please let us know when you will be sworn in. Anyone wish to come forward speaking for or against the demolition of this property? Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, public comment portion of the hearing, and the commissioners will start to ask questions, beginning on my right.
Mr. Carlin. I'm sorry, so you're not done yet, you know. Does it appear that the entire structure was built at one time? The first and second floors, like this was,
Well, I think it was built at one time and has been modified. I think they've tried to shore up the building over time. That's where the steel I-beam and that concrete, added concrete footing at the base of the wall happened. So I think it's been modified structurally, and then the second floor, I think, is something, they have a little kitchen up there, which is probably done after the fact.
okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
I'm sure you have, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Have y'all asked to have the lines wrapped for construction?
I actually had Tico come out and put the orange protective barriers on it, though the windstorm blew quite a few of them off. But, yes. I mean, I don't know if is that the kind of wrap you're talking about, or?
There's a couple of different kinds, but I mean, I saw the picture with that. I just wondered, there's another one that I've seen in the past that they can actually come out and wrap and pretty much eliminates that fear. That was just, a question I had.
I had not explored a permanent wrap. It was more of a temporary wrap if we were going to have to get up on the roof.
Yeah, well, that would only be for during construction, but,
Yes.
okay, and then on the hardship side, the $15,000 for the underground electricity seems to be kind of the sticking point. Is that fair to say?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think if you look at that estimate, there's also other significant costs associated with trying to rehabilitate the structure, shoring it up, as opposed to a flat demolition. That's significantly more. So, and then the framing would be more difficult, and the foundation work would be more difficult. So I think it's a combination of, shoring, demolition, framing, concrete, and then the Tico hardship. So if you throw all those together, that's why it took the price for rehabilitating higher than to build new.
Is there a picture that exists from February of 2020 to compare to the newest picture?
Ron, what date was your picture taken? My pictures are more recent, so I don't have one with me that was from back then. Yours is June 21? Okay. Sorry, we don't have a picture tonight for that.
That's all I've got for now.
Okay. Commissioner Sutton,
I have no question at this point in time. Thank you very much.
following the line of questioning that the former commissioner had been asking, do you have a site plan that indicates the location of the underground utilities in place currently?
I was never able to get the underground utility locations. I think the site plan really only addresses the overhead power lines, but not the underground utilities.
Well, there's a lot of discussion point in your response about even in working the rehabilitation, that if you had gone in and if you were to go about replacing the foundation, there was that possibility of running into underground utilities as part of your response. And I did note the telecommunications line from Verizon. They said, it does run through the alley, and if they were to proceed, to be sure that all the typical precautions were taken. So, when we're researching these projects and we're looking at whether or not demolition makes sense, understanding the underground utilities, and if that's attacked in terms of trying to show the hardship, it's always something for us that we would want to look to, right? If there's documentation, and I would suspect that Verizon has something, and that the city probably, if there's waste lines or gas lines or that sort of thing in the alley, that the city has that as well. So you weren't able to get any of that from the city as well, if they had anything?
I think I was pretty much going off of their responses to the encroachment. They were all referencing, possible conflict with their utilities. I'm assuming that they flagged and marked where their utilities were, and if there were no issues, I'm not sure they would have mentioned that in their reports.
Right, and you did state that as well, that the only one who did not sign off with moving forward
Correct.
with the encroachment was Tico.
That is correct.
Okay. So understanding that it's an additional 15,000 to rehabilitate the foundation and do that extra shoring, or at least doing the extra shoring for the first floor. If there was indeed some type of wrap that Tico could do to their lines while you worked on the project, that 16,000, or at least that 15,000 from Tico would go away.
If that's the case, yes, but we still have the challenge of trying to shore up that structure without it coming down. So there still would be significant costs. And I was not able to get, contact a company that would be able to tell me if they could even do it. I called a couple moving companies and they wouldn't even look at it. So I would have to do a lot of research to see how we would stabilize that second floor
I see
and
your,
allowing us to remove the entire first floor and have something holding it up and still be able to dig out the old footings and put in the new footings.
And,
So
and even if that were the case, the understanding here is that the city and everyone else besides Tico would allow for the encroachment to stand in its existing location. You're not talking about moving the whole building. In that case, it's just shoring up the first floor, rebuilding the first floor, correct, in its
that
current
is
location?
correct, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner, did you have another question or comment?
yeah, I just wanted to ask, kind of following up on that question. I see in your quote here on the comparison that you've got a line item here for the demolition, but I don't see here with this anyway, a line item for the cost of the dumpsters. You've got 0 for that line item. Is that a correct amount?
That 8,000 was a fixed quote to include hauling off. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll go ahead, and I think you do have 5 minutes for rebuttal, so if there's anything else that you'd like to add to the record or in response to anything.
I don't have anything else to rebut with.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and the commissioners will discuss the case. And remember, we are only talking about the demolition here and whether or not it meets the parameters. Anyone have anything they'd like to discuss?
I don't personally see the hardship.
Other than $1 difference?
It's a 5% difference on the total quote.
Had to add its.
Excuse me,
its
Commissioner
largest
Taylor, when you guys are speaking, I can't hear you way over
Okay.
here. Can you speak up a little bit? Thank
I'll
you.
do my best.
Sorry.
It's 5% on the total quote. It's 1% on the value of the home. So looking at just that one particular line item, it just doesn't seem like much of a hardship from a financial standpoint to me. There's also some advantages to those utilities going underground. So you are getting some sort of value for your extra cost. That's, the construction side, I can see where getting up on that roof underneath that utility line obviously is a safety issue. I think there may be some alternative methods of construction there to help with that. And as far as shoring up, that's something that in the renovation world we do pretty much every day. So some projects are a little harder than others. Some we have to be a little more creative. I've learned with older structures in Tampa specifically, because especially accessory structures where people have come in and done work after the fact, that we have to be real creative sometimes. But it's doable. And then I look at the quote difference on the two, new versus old, or the renovation, and we're talking $20,000.
It's a close margin.
It's very, very close. you know, I'm not here to look at each little line item and see which one I agree with or don't agree with, or vice versa. But just looking at them, comparing them, it's very close. And the 15,000 seems to be the hardship number that was used. So that's, again, that's just my personal opinion as of, you know, right now.
Okay.
My personal disappointment comes from a totally different direction on this. We have a very valuable piece of intact residential property in this historic district. We have a substantially original dwelling, and we have a substantially contributing pairing with its accessory structure. For a small percentage of a proposed construction budget, I find it very hard to think that every avenue has not yet been traveled down for the maintenance and restoration of this existing structure. You mentioned other alternatives and maybe perhaps other planning for the protection of the electrical lines. The difficulties in making renovation happen is, as you also mentioned, part of the difficulties of working with an older structure. I'm just wondering if the owners are really prepared to undertake either a new construction in this place, or for that matter, the renovation of the existing to begin with. That for that small amount of money, it's not a small amount of money. I mean, it's 15 grand for taking care of electrical lines and systems. Pales really in comparison with the rest of the proposed renovation or replacement of this structure. If we're quibbling about this, I would very much prefer really instead to see that this original infrastructure on this site remain and be rehabilitated.
Okay. Commissioner Myers, any questions or comments, something that we should consider before we move to a motion?
No. No,
Okay.
I don't think,
Well, I concur with all the comments made, and if someone is ready to make a motion, we can put one forth. One, two, three. I'm gonna pick.
I gotta find the right one.
I think we have a volunteer.
The sample motion is titled demolition.
Yes, I see that now. Scrolled away on the very, very bottom.
That's the one I was looking for.
I move to deny.
If you're moving for a denial of the request, keep in mind that state statute requires that you list specifically the segments of the code that are not being satisfied by the presentation.
Yes. I move to deny a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition for ARC 21-364 for the property located at 818 South Edison Avenue in the Hyde Park Historic District. As much as the agent has not satisfied the requirements for Chapter 27, Section 27-116, subsection F of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances, specifically with respect that not established this evening is an economic hardship, and that two, that the ability to renovate this property has been established as being feasible.
Here, or a second for the motion, please.
I'll second.
All in favor, please state aye and raise your hand indicating so.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1.
Commissioners, Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Moving to the next agenda item, which is ARC 21-407. This is for the address of 606 South Boulevard. This is also in the Hyde Park Historic District. On the subject site, there is a non-contributing structure that dates back to 1953. The zoning is R01. The request in front of you this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness for new construction, 7-unit townhomes with site improvements. There are no variances attached to this request. If we could go to my monitor, please. Thank you. I wanted to share with you the 1929 Sanborn map. There are 2 design exceptions attached to this request coming forward that have already been approved through land development. One is that the front yard average is consistent with the historic fabric. I'll show you the current condition, but this is the fabric from 1929, and you see the setbacks to the structures, to the porch, and then to the body of the building. And then the second design exception was the orientation of the parcel itself. That in using the Sanborn map and other illustrations, the zoning minister felt that the orientation was to Bay Street and not to the secondary street, which is South Boulevard. So both of those have been solidified. So the 2 design exceptions that I spoke about. Moving to the Sanborn map, once again, the property in question is in the green box. It is on the corner of South Boulevard and Bay Street. There is a 10-foot alley to the north of the subject site that runs east and west. This is looking from above. You see the orientation of the fabric that's left behind. It does face Bay Street. This is the subject site with a non-contributing structure that can be removed administratively. Once again, you have the alley to the north, you have South Boulevard to the west, and you have Bay Street to the south. This is just looking at the subject site from Boulevard. This is the non-contributing 1953 structure. Just looking down Boulevard in both directions. This is looking to the north. Turning around to the south towards Swan. To experience some of the structures in the immediate vicinity. This is Boulevard in the foreground. These are some of the non-contributing structures that are just to the west of Boulevard. As is this one is too. This is looking back at the subject site. This is the elevation that faces Boulevard, and this is the north elevation. This is the alley. The condition of the alley in Hyde Park standards is very nice. And this is the alley, how it comes out to Boulevard. And just to share a couple of additional shots with you, this is looking down Bay Street. It does have some of the historic fabric, has the granite curb, has the brick streets. And in the other direction, once again, you see the brick street, the granite curbing. And then you see how the parkway here is very period appropriate. And then in the prior shot, how there was a little parking well. And I'm sure they're going to address how they're going to resolve those issues. At this time, the agent could come to the podium and address the board. Thank you very much.
If you could just please Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the City Attorney's Office. I know several people came in after the oath was given. Can you just confirm on the record that you've been sworn?
I have not been sworn in.
So at this time, everybody that came in after the initial swearing, if they could please stand up and raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
legible? All right. All right. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, commissioners. This is our first time presenting in front of your board, and I thought I'd give a brief introduction to myself and our development team. I represent Wolf Partners. I, together with my partner, Josh Nicholson, and some of our other development team, are here to present to you this project. We're a vertically integrated development group, meaning we do the architecture, fabrication, and contracting. I'm the architect, my partner Josh is the contractor, and together we fabricate off-site and see these developments all the way through. So we're very interested in maintaining control over all the, from the bigger picture to orientation on the site to the minutia and the details. We hope that you find this consistent with the design guidelines. Seeing it's in the historic district, another thing about our designs is we really like to not have any kind of preconceptions about what the style wants to be or what the aesthetic should be, but rather look to its place within the larger historical trajectory and surrounding buildings. And knowing that, our first order of business was to sign on Stephanie Farrell as our historic preservation consultant. So she's here with us, and she's been instrumental along the entire process, and we hope to continue to work with her going forward. So I'm going to jump into the presentation now. As Ron said, it's on the corner of Bay and Boulevard, currently R01, a single-story medical office building that's vacant, and the future land use is RM35. And we're going to propose 7 single-family attached townhomes with detached parking structures, access via the alley, and it's currently under review for a S1 special use. So here's the proposed site plan. We've got 7 units with courtyards interstitial between the main dwelling areas and the vehicular storage areas in the rear. We have been granted the frontage along Bay, but really working with staff and Ron and just as what the urban fabric kind of wants in this area is really 2 primary facades. So we've taken special care to make sure that our South Boulevard facade addresses it not only from the pedestrian level with access in these areas, but also along with the aesthetic and the undulations that we've proposed along that western facade. We've got 2 extra parking spaces on either side of these detached garages. Like I said, we have pedestrian access directly along Bay, and then we have 2 access points along Boulevard to this westernmost unit. We are going to infill the current concrete pad of parking that's along that right-of-way with landscaping and some palms and I believe some magnolias. And we are proposing a 16-foot front setback off of Bay based on the front yard averaging of the adjacent structures. We have a special street setback along South Boulevard, which is 42 feet from the center line of the 60-foot right-of-way. So our westernmost setback is 12 feet. And we have refuse storage in the garages, and garbage pickup is going to be within the alley, which is where it currently is now. Oops. Pop to the renderings real quick. So this is a view looking to the northeast from the corner of Bay and Boulevard. One of the things that we thought was important is to break up the mass of the structure as we establish a similar rhythm and cadence to the adjacent buildings. While although it's a larger multifamily building surrounded by multiple building types, we thought that having not only setbacks as you go up in elevation and stepping the second and third floor back further from the first, but also providing different design aesthetics from unit to unit rather than an exercise in copy and paste. You can see here we have some front loggias along the entry to further soften that, how the building meets the ground, and then provide a vertical garden of sorts for the pedestrian experience, but then also a little bit of privacy for the residents on the interior. This is a closer look at that same corner. Boulevard is here on your left. We have the pedestrian access through that front entry loggia into the foyer. And then another secondary access further down the road with a pergola and direct access into the rear courtyard for that unit. With a small retaining wall and some ground cover in there. This is standing in the sidewalk along Bay. We've modified the different heights of the entryways to provide some elevational intrigue, and then also we've got some different materiality choices here with some tiles and a textured stucco finish. We've taken cues from some of our historical precedents on the corbelling and the window arrangement and eave details, along with the materiality. And that's the same view of those entries. And this is looking to the south down Boulevard. You can see that secondary access directly into the courtyard with the facade that I mentioned previously, that we're trying to articulate that in a way that it seems like it could be a primary facade and not just a forgotten kind of carved off edge of a multifamily building. Let's see here. For the materiality, oh, sorry. Looks better on my screen. We've got a barrel tile roof, common to a lot of the buildings in the significant period in the 1920s in Hyde Park. We've got a textured stucco exterior wall finish with some medallions and other ornament details. Our entry door, we also have some chevron tiles that we're going to place within portions of the facade. And our entry door is a 3-panel wood door. We've got some exterior light fixtures selected here, and a garage door is going to be a Clopay oak finish metal door. We're proposing fiber cement soffits, and our exterior doors and windows are going to be high quality metal windows from CGI Sentinel series. And we also utilize a particular flashing detail here, which allows us to inset the windows further from the face of the stucco and the facade to give it that look that would mimic what was done back in the 1920s and 30s, rather than have it flush with the front elevation. And then here we've got some metal shutters on that loggia. We're proposing poured concrete walkways with St. Augustine grass and ground cover and other landscape elements, and also some medallions as ornament. And I'm going to jump back to, let's see here. Precedents. So we've identified some precedents within the historic district that we think are relevant to this project, and we'd like to share those with you. We have this one at 212 South Boulevard. It's a good example of the kind of density and materiality that was used in the significant period back in the 1920s with the clay tile roofs, the arched windows, the arched doorway, and some of the detailing here is similar to what we're proposing as well. 611 West Horatio is also a contributing structure. Just the density and placement on site is relevant here, intermixed with in a semi-residential neighborhood. Same thing with the Seville apartments, higher density mixed in with single-family residential. And then recently, just to the north of us is the Allegro. And we thought that this one was pretty successful in the way that it was able to break up a larger mass and use the idea of stepping back from the initial facade as you go up in elevation, so it doesn't seem so imposing on the street. And the Egypt Shrine building was what was there before the Allegro building, we've come to learn. They also utilized an entry loggia and some arched openings, along with a double corbelling or brackets on the eave. And then the Edgewater building was a source of major inspiration for us with the eaves and the balconies, a lot of the detailing, the cadence of the windows and arrangement on the facade, along with the materiality. We have further diagrams and elevations if you'd like to ask questions, but I think that gives a pretty good overview of what we're proposing.
Does that conclude your presentation?
That
then?
concludes my presentation.
We'll move on to the staff report then. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. There is a letter from the Hyde Park Spanish Town Creek Association that has no objections. It's in your packet. Staff's finding that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park Design Guidelines. We reviewed this request on August 27, 2021. Moving down the conditions that were associated with the staff report, I'd like to go through those at this time. At the time that the staff report was generated, the setbacks were not established. As I entered into this request, the design exception has been approved for the setbacks. It met the averaging with the abutting structures to the east along Bay. We asked for additional information and dimensional requirements from the property line to show the setback of the structures. So the structure, the most proud facade, and then as it steps back, I believe the information is in the packet, but if he could illustrate additional information talking about the stepping of the facade. There was some mention about the solid waste, but how are they going to handle the mechanical solution? If there's any fencing or buffering associated with this request, show the details and the location of the fencing and buffering. Associated with multifamily structures, that the landscaping is presented at the public hearing. So we're going to look at the species, we're going to look at the location of the information that should be submitted for a final approval, and that's to include hardscape as well. On the entryways from Bay, they had a stepping stone system detail with some gravel surround. Staff has some issues with the gravel introduction. It's foreign to the district, and we asked for them to find a different solution. Multiple wall sections should be introduced for final approval as well. And those should be presented at the public hearing this evening. And as you go through the multiple wall sections, from the top all the way to grade, discuss the roof materials, the overhangs, and provide examples of the finished wall materials, the foundation and any foundation enclosure, the final selection for the windows and how they operate. There was some mention about the garage doors. There was a comment that we had initially about breaking up the accessory structure. And the roof line is one contiguous building, and how they could break up the massing of the accessory structure. And to conclude, final hardware and lighting selection. That concludes staff's portion, and I'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ron. We'll go ahead and open this up to public comment. If there is anyone who is for or against this project who would like to come up, please do so at this time. And if you could, as you come forward, please state your name and your address. You have 3 minutes. Hello.
Good evening. My name's Bobby or Roberta O'Brien Quenneville. I live at 702 Unit C, West Bay Street. I live on the very block that they are proposing this. I first would like to mention, it might seem a little hypocritical because I'm in a townhouse myself, but one that is 40 years old. I've lived there for almost 40 years. It is my home, and it will continue to be my home, I hope. But this is going to have a huge impact on the small block that I call home. And I would like to first give deference to the 2 architects on the board, to Mr. Wolf I know that your jobs are not easy. I've seen these kind of struggles. My husband was an architect, and I saw him design many things over the 4 decades we were together. But I come up here because I am truly distressed that this development could get this far before being given any notice that this is happening. And I'll tell you what my distress is, and unfortunately I sent an email to the developers. I did not get a response last week, but I'm concerned about several things. The staff report that you got mentions several things that they look at, standards. And I'll start with the scale, height, and width. The height of this will be 35 plus feet because according to your regulations, you don't have to include the tower for the mechanical. And in most of the illustrations I viewed online, they have that. That's in addition to the 35 feet. This is 3 stories, not 2 stories like all of the buildings that they showed across Boulevard or on that block are all 2 or single story, not 3 story. They also will not take up a complete half block. This will disturb the wind pattern, the light patterns. You used several examples as your historic examples, and I know you've got Stephanie with you. I'm a former reporter. I used to cover things. I don't come in with illusions, and first time I'm speaking because I usually cover these things and don't get to have a personal opinion. But I will say, the examples that you gave, the historic building at 212 South Boulevard, that is 2 blocks below Kennedy. That was a commercial, near the commercial end. This is in the 700 block, totally different. DeSoto, also possible, but it's been there a while. Allegro, that's a senior citizen center that shouldn't have been allowed. It at least took up an old business building, but we have had flooding on Boulevard, which we never had before, after that was allowed and the footprint that was allowed to fill up. Also, on West Horatio, that again does not take half a block, and it has more of a relief of that attitude. Every building is 2-story. There's a lot more orientation stream-wise. I would suggest you come walk it. I know I'm running over.
Yep.
I do apologize.
Thank
Well, you know what? I live there. It's my home. My husband died there. I will die there someday.
Thank you.
It's my home. And I wish you'd come see it because you get only a camera's view from someone who has a vested interest, and I understand it, but not a huge block 35 feet high.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any others who would like to come forth, either speaking for or against the project at this time? Seeing no others, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing, and the applicant has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Don't the commissioners want to ask questions first?
Oh,
The commissioners need to ask
oh,
questions.
That's right. I'm sorry. We will ask questions first. Sorry. And I'll start on my left this time with Commissioner Sutton.
There's an awful lot here to unpack in terms of the design elements here. But let me start with a real basic item. You have proposed as part of this plan, a lot of different things happening on the ground plane. You have shirt walls, you have gates, I assume you have fences, you have hardscapes. Can you run those down for us in greater detail if you have those available to us?
So I think probably first would help would be the rendered site plan. So we do have, working from west to east, we do have a a small 18-inch retaining wall proposed here with ground cover to separate from the right-of-way. Poured concrete pavers here. We have since reduced, after recommendations from staff, eliminated the pebbles, and we're going to do more of a brick inlay paver around the poured concrete. We have this loggia here and planters on every other one. So we have a small loggia, which was shown in the renderings here. This is a gate that goes into the entry foyer. We have the similar aesthetic in the rear with a gate and a pergola. And all of this is meant to create more of an inviting facade to the pedestrian area and not have it be more of a primary facade along with bay. Go back to the site plan. And that pattern continues eastward down the site. We do have a privacy wall, a 6-foot block privacy wall against the adjacent property. It's a multifamily residential. And then we do have gated access through the site from north to south on either side.
While we're here there, you mentioned gates, and of course you have some screening. I see on your elevations a certain, I will assume it's a metal type of product in a repeating chevron type pattern. Is that exactly what you're planning on bringing in? Is that going to also be all of that screening, all of that low fencing, all of that gate work?
Yes, it's all going to be custom fabricated metal work as it's proposed, with that repeating chevron pattern that may or may not be operable. I'm working on that.
But that is the intent at this point.
That's the intent.
That is the intent. So basically you're looking at a build-to-suit sort of a situation for you here as opposed to a product off shelf.
Yes.
I would also like to bring up a point made by staff. Do you have an elevation of your garages as extensive as you do on your building front?
I can get you a rendering. We're working on the elevations. Let's see here.
Because the point is well brought up by staff. Gone through quite a bit of design effort to break up the massing of these townhouses. But so far at this point in time, not so for the garages.
Garage.
And that appears to me, at least on the site plan, to be quite a monolith.
So this is looking further, stepping further back down Boulevard.
Can you actually zoom that back out so you see the whole thing? Thank you.
So we tried to break up the facade elevation on the rear with the not only the double pane doors, but also introducing these columns on the interior side of it. We have not yet broken up the roof line, however.
That is all for my questioning at this moment, please.
Can you show us on the site plan where the mechanicals are going?
Yes. So we have, if I look at the roof plan, they'll be on this flat TPO roof. We've illustrated a diagram here showing the pedestrian view from both Bay and Boulevard across the street, and that the height of the mechanical equipment will be shielded by the pergola and the roof structure, both along Bay and along Boulevard. So they'll be centrally located within that flat roof.
What's the height of that? Sorry, what's the height of that? I see the elevation datum line above the note. What is that height?
That's shown at 40 feet, which is the max allowable height, but, so the roof line is set at 35 feet. We do have parapets extending about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet, depending on the detailing. But we will shield that with, or those parapets will shield the mechanical equipment.
You've sized the mechanical equipment already?
We have
that
not
I'm
sized
pretty
it yet.
sure.
I'm not, well, we will centrally locate them. They would have to get, if we look at this view line here, they would have to be right up against that parapet.
And there is some play in their location on the roof.
Mm-hmm. This is illustrating our intent without having sized it, without having done our
Okay.
energy calcs, but I'm not sure the size of the condensing units, but we'll take care to make sure they are shielded.
Okay. I'm sorry.
So for that
Questions?
practical purposes, your parapet height is subject to change within your building envelope available to you to handle that screening?
Yes, within the allowable limits,
And the 40 foot is your max?
yes.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm sorry.
Can you go through a wall detail? I know you showed us a window kind of cut, but
So in order to achieve this stepping back of the facade, we are fabricating these out of cold form steel, prefabricated off-site. So that allows us to do some interesting things structurally that you have a more difficult time doing out of block. So we're going to have a cantilever out to receive this slight offset here from the main entryway, and then we'll step back to this parapet. We've got our barrel tile roof above here. This is all just going to be enclosed space. This is a unique condition where we have a plinth on if you look at the plan, there's a plinth access via the first landing of the stairs going from 2 to 3, and it's meant to be a little study or computer room above the front entry.
Do you have other wall sections?
This one may not look as complete, but it does illustrate the setback from the property line and as it steps back with the balconies above and the roof parapet.
there's a staff note here regarding landscaping and turf. Is all turf going to be natural?
Yes.
To follow up on that, you said that there would be magnolias and palms along in the parkway.
Yes.
Are magnolias permitted as street trees by the city? Have you asked?
I'd have to defer to my landscape on that, but let's see if I misspoke. Josh, do you know offhand?
They're type 1s, yes.
Yeah. So they are permitted, they're type 1s, and there are magnolias and palms,
Excuse me,
cabbage palms.
can you just make sure that you're having the conversation on the record because he
Yes, ma'am.
is not getting recorded? Thank you.
Yes. They are permitted.
So can you go through this your renderings have a lot of landscape elements, and they're really nice renderings, but we want to be sure that what you exhibit in the renderings jive with your plan. So can we just walk through this with you what the intent is and the nature of the element, you know, if it's a buffering element, if it's a more decorative element, that sort of thing, and then what it brings to the project in terms of any historic reference or anything like that, or the urban quality that you're giving to your client, to your neighbors.
So we do have some specific buffering species here along the west to shield from this parking space to the right-of-way.
What kind of elements? What are they actually?
They are, let me see,
What
like a
would-
podocarpus, like a shrub, you know,
So how high will they get?
42 inches. Enough to shield a car, but not enough to screen from the exit, from the,
Okay.
and then we've planned, I believe we have some olive trees here in the front yards. Like I said, the cabbage palms and magnolias alternating across the right-of-way, and then low plantings in front of these, the either loges or the small planter boxes in between the front entrances. And then we also have plantings in between the garage along the alley. But we have coordinated with our landscape and used the renderings as a design intent with them, and they've been working towards getting those species to align with the renderings.
And I take it also, sir, from what I see from the existing photographs, that there's really nothing major on-site existing that needs either relocation or replacement in some major form.
There is not. It's majority surface parking. I believe on our demo plan, not sure if it made it into this presentation, none of those species are protected, nor do they need relocating. They just count towards our tree table. And then the existing building, we are doing, planning on demoing, and there's going to be, I think, asbestos mitigation, and that's it.
Are all windows going to be the same style that you showed, or are egress windows that are operable going to be different?
The operable will be double hung. We may use casement, but the ground floor would be fixed, and then egress would be double hung with the same style.
And are they true divided light, simulated?
They're dual pane, low E insulated.
That doesn't answer the question.
I'm sorry, I
That-
didn't hear you. Oh, there.
I was asking, are they TDLs, SDLs, true divided light, simulated divided light?
They're a simulated divided light.
Okay, so there will be an exposed divider on the window.
On the exterior and interior,
Right.
yes. Not in the interstitial space between the panes.
Yeah, right.
And the rendering seems to show that they're inoperable, but that's not correct. Is that what I'm
The
hearing?
rendering, yes, some of those are operable. They're shown as inoperable.
That's why I asked.
Because remember, we're still in a schematic phase here for
Right.
things.
I did do a copy and paste on the windows.
Do
So
you-
yes, we'll
Oh,
plan
yeah.
for those egress and plan for the sizes of that opening.
Do you have any examples of your hardware and lighting that you plan to use?
We do have, I rendered we have not chosen door hardware. I did render this is a Hinckley lighting product that is rendered and modeled to scale in accurately. The doors, the garage doors, I should say, are rendered accurately. This is an example of that CGI with the same, on a project I used previously, this is that CGI window with the muntins, and then also that vinyl extrusion flashing that allows us to inset it further into the wall so you get that shadow line that you see here.
Can you give that dimension? Do you know it?
It's between 2 inches and 2.5 inches. depending on the wall thickness, if you're in a 3.5 or 5.5.
I have a general question, more of a curiosity, respecting your precedents for design, basically from other existing structures, new and old, within the confines and nearby areas of Hyde Park. Perhaps an oversight for one reason or another, but is there a particular reason why not included in your presentation of precedent the larger and very close by structures for Gorey Elementary or Wilson Middle School?
We were trying to stick more with that we're in the Mediterranean revival style, and also with multifamily projects instead of the different uses, the public buildings, but those would be relevant, yes.
Because they do share with your project a certain degree in height and massing.
Mm-hmm.
Just a general question.
Yeah, probably more oversight.
So I'd like to go through the rest of the bullet list, just so we cover all those, and then if we have other questions. We talked about the orientation of the parcel and the front yard average. Can you just go from the site plan, probably is the more appropriate, the dimensions to the facades as the building steps back, and both from Bay and from Boulevard?
Yes.
Can you zoom into that? It's really
So with our proposed building or the existing structures that we're going are averaging off of?
well, you can talk about the averaging, but then your proposed, what you
Okay.
actually have for your setbacks, because
Sure.
you have a series of facades, even at the ground, that steps. So just understanding the relationship to the street.
Let me first point to this exercise where we took measurements to the building envelope, to the porch projection, and to the nearest projection for each of the adjacent structures along Bay. And averaging to the building envelope, these red dots, we come to a 15.75 foot setback. So we've set ours at 16 to the building envelope. Now there are built projections that come out closer to the property line than that. And so with that as a reference, we have our primary, our enclosure is no closer than 16 foot ever along Bay. We do step it back further here. We have not dimensioned that, but we never get closer than 10 feet to the property line, which is also where the existing building sets, and there are some projections with porches and stairways if you work eastward down Bay. So our buffer on the ground level is between 11 and 16 now that we've stepped it back, and then we go further as we go up the facade.
And then for Boulevard?
Boulevard, we are at 12, primarily for this. There's a kitchen beyond here. Everything else is stepped back 2 to 3 feet further. So we hit that 12-foot threshold only for a small portion of that facade. Then it gets to 13, 14 on the ground level, as you can see here in the ghosted image back there. And then different portions are articulated further back as you go up to the third level.
Okay. You talked about your hardscape and your landscape plan. Were there any other materials hardscape-wise that we needed to understand? We talked about concrete walkways, right? There's no paver, no brick.
We are, after recommendations from staff, rather than the ground pebbles as a covering, we are considering doing the poured concrete pavers
Right.
with brick perimeters.
Okay, all right, I missed that detail, okay. Can you specifically speak to the materials for the rafters, soffit, and the fascias, if any?
Yes. So the soffit is planned to be fiber cement board, and then any of the pergolas or corbelling is going to be cedar.
And the brackets and corbels that you have called out,
Cedar.
cedar? When we get to the porches, what are the materials for those interior spaces of those? The decking, the ceiling, and any columns that might be there?
So it'll be a lightweight concrete topping, potentially tiled. Like I said, we're early on in the design process for that. But it will be the stucco finish and,
Even at the lower level, the ground floor levels?
we haven't gotten that far on what the materiality. The interior will be stucco, and it'll be a concrete stoop on the interior of those foyers.
And the ceiling?
The ceiling, I've got to convince my contractor to do something nice, but we're not sure yet.
TBD, okay. And then I think we covered that. And the garage doors, I only had one question myself. You said that the renderings are exactly what you were intending at this time. That includes the lights that okay, all right.
That's a smaller version of that same Hinckley lighting product that we're
Okay.
referencing.
And then one final question, foundation of the project. I know you showed the wall section, but I don't recall what you said that the foundation was.
It's a turned down slab.
Okay,
Our site slopes slightly to the east, but the finished floor above grade is going to be set at around 24 inches.
that's your elevation as 24?
Yes.
That was actually another question I had, thank you.
If I may ask, what's the slope from along Bay, from one side to the other? Do you know?
I believe it's about 14 inches from the west side to the east. So the average is about 24 inches. But these are, I would consider these more DD/CD details that we have not yet been able to work through, but understanding that the intent is to have it raised above grade in a way that's more prominent than just flat on grade.
Okay, any other questions?
Commissioners, if I may, just before you close the public hearing, there were some details that came out in the presentation. I just want to bring more context to the staff comments. You touched on some of them. It does appear that many of the windows are fixed windows. Fixed windows are normally something that the staff does not support, and particularly on ground level type applications. Mediterranean offers you a wide array of options for windows. Could be casements, could be double hungs. So I think that would be one point I'd want to emphasize. The landscaping in more detail seems overly lavish for Hyde Parkway. I would ask for more detail on that and try to get that in context with the precedents that are out there. The garage elevations, I think, presents a problem. Staff wasn't able to provide you a recommendation on garage detailing. We saw none this evening. It was a point on the staff report.
Yep.
So I'm not sure how you can move on anything final without garage elevations. There was a reference to these being schematic drawings or there being details that haven't been determined yet. This is the certificate of appropriateness process. You're supposed to have those details for your consideration this evening. So that presents some discussion that needs to happen on your ability to move this application forward.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any comments? All right, then you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay. Well, I think that it's important to consider what's existing on this site as we consider a new development. Currently, it's a non-contributing medical office building that's majority surface parked. It has 31 parking spaces on it. It's almost complete lot coverage in terms of impervious. What we're proposing here is, we don't believe it's out of scale with the neighborhood. There's quite a few buildings within a couple blocks that are of similar height and proportion, if not greater. I think the important thing is to pay homage to what the precedent is and what is there, and we're trying to contribute in a positive way to the development. With this development, we are not only creating something that is going to be inhabitable by more folks than just a commercial building, but we're also increasing the pervious amount on site, reducing the traffic impact. We have 16 spaces, and the current site is parked at 31 spaces. So stormwater, in my opinion, is not an issue. It will be, the stormwater management on site will be improved with this development compared to concerns of flooding along Boulevard. And I think that a multifamily, multi-parcel structure is in keeping with the historic precedent, especially along Bay, considering that Mr. Bryan's building is also a multifamily structure that composes more than one parcel, accessed via alley off of a garage. So it's not that it's new, but it's not dissimilar to something that's been there for quite some time.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing, and the commissioners will now discuss the case. So, I do agree that the project is moving in the right direction, and I do think it's an improvement to what is currently existing on the property. And certainly there'll be more pervious area. I do think, though, coming here tonight and not giving us enough information for us to move forward with a discussion regarding the garage, the accessory structure, even though those are secondary, they can be so tangible, and especially in a historic district, and you're on a corner lot. And so the way that one views that, and the hope is that this becomes a more walkable portion of Hyde Park. I mean, this definitely can be a desert. I've been here after hours and on weekends when my kids used to go to the Tuesday morning musicale. So I know how dead it can be. But in the future, you know, with the correct development and the correct elements in place, this could be more walkable and enjoyable. So accessory structures become ever more important in terms of their relationship to the overall project. So that for me is a sticking point. I think there isn't enough information there, and I would certainly say straight off, from what I saw in the rendering that was produced, that you just aren't there yet. And I couldn't honestly, you know, say that we have enough information to move forward tonight. Other than that, I think there are certain elements that definitely are speaking the right language, and I mean in terms of massing and relationships of pieces and parts, the elements that we talk about at the streetscape and even at the sky as you move up. There is some concern about the height, and I understand that you can go to 40, but being just a little bit more conscious about your context, your existing context, and the neighboring, you know, the buildings that actually front along the street of Bay and Boulevard with your project, not something that's blocks away. And I understand we ask for precedent, and we often get it from the south extreme of the district when we're in the northern part. Just being mindful of that as well. And then in terms of landscaping, I know what projects look like when they first go in, and they're going to look skeletal for years before they fill in all the way. Maybe in 2 years you'll get some nice bushes, but the trees, that takes a little while to fill in. And honestly, there are definitely properties within the district and other districts that have just gorgeous landscape and gardens that really add to the ambience of the neighborhoods overall. I would suggest that, you know, if this is continued, that your landscape architect is here to talk about it. Other than that, those are my comments and my concerns. Oh, and then the windows. I do agree. I think, you know, here we are in the gorgeous part of the year, the part that we love being in Florida, opening my windows. As soon as it said, you know, I could have dry air. So, man, I feel for those people not being able to open the windows. So and especially being that close to Bay Shore, you're gonna get these beautiful breezes. So just reconsidering the windows and their operation. Comments, questions, concerns?
I piggyback those comments. I mean, I think the project's definitely headed in the right direction. I think currently there are some issues potentially with the massing in the immediate block. But it's a nice looking project. The garage, unfortunately, that structure, again,
We need definitely more
we gotta have
information on that.
some more. Because it doesn't even realistically look like it goes with the front primary structure.
The front part.
It looks like it just got forgot. So, you know, I think most of my comments basically just piggyback what you just said.
Another part of this project too that I think, I don't want to say is necessarily a miss at this point in time. I do recognize this is highly schematic in nature, but there's an awful lot about the appearance of this form that is driven by their detail elements. Example, your roof setbacks, you've got the brackets, you've got your pergolas, you have a whole host of different things, your insets with maybe tile work. If I recall, I actually saw something that looked like it had at one point in time, or does have at this point, some metal grillage involved with it. Because of the intensive nature of the detailing that makes, if you will, the ins and outs and the consistency of these 7 dwellings supposedly fit here, we really ought to have a better shot at looking at what you are proposing to do with those details. We don't necessarily want to tie your hands down to cast in stone specification at this point in time, but we would prefer to have a greater sense of feeling that there's this integration of these details into this architecture that you're providing, and that they in fact fit. If this were just like a onesie or twosie sort of an item, we would normally say, okay, we can coordinate with staff on this. But we're looking at a whole package here. And I think that's a missed opportunity. And part of the things that we would be looking at for the consistency of what your statement is, you know, the building is of a neo-colonial Spanish revival, and we need to make that fit, even though we're probably pushing the representation of this project a little bit past schematic design.
Mr. Myers?
I always have a great deal of difficulty with these, with row houses. Because you are architecturally pulled in 2 directions. One, you're making a long building, and you're also making 7 units. You have the opportunity here because you have 3 units on one side, 3 units on the other side, and you have a central, and then you have a central unit. So perhaps that building can look like 7 units as well as 1 building. I also believe that while you have attempted to address that corner of a boulevard and, what is it, Bay?
Bay.
It's not, you can do a lot more there because that unit, both of the end units can be a little more special than they are right now. And that helps, I think, the whole building address the site more effectively. And you have 2 different kinds of entry conditions. One you call a loggia, and the other is this is across the bay side.
Oh, just lower planters.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm sorry, you can't respond.
I'm sorry.
We're
Okay,
actually,
yeah.
we're actually supposed to be
so
commenting back
here,
and
let me,
forth.
I'll reorient myself so that I'm not. But in order for us to approve this, I feel like it needs, because we're looking for pedestrian friendly, we are always looking, it's a major part of the design guidelines that we should have porches. And and I don't feel that this series of 7 townhouses has sufficient outdoor space along Bay. And I think that that will be very helpful in, in addressing the building, then in making this set of townhouses feel like they belong in this porch-heavy neighborhood.
Understood. Yeah.
And with all the ceilings and the things that we are always looking for, which are still not there.
Right.
In a different world, different places in the United States, Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore, very simple townhouses, basically a block to live in, but they all have that little piece of front yard, and they all have that porch, so I can understand where you're coming from for something like that.
Do we have the possibility of a motion to entertain?
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
The applicant would like to ask for continuance.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think you guys have addressed a few things that we need to provide more detail on, and I think also the comments that we just heard with the porch ideas and the front yards is something we need to go back to the drawing board on and come to you with a complete project that we can have a better discussion about. So we'd like to ask for a continuance on this.
Okay. May I get a motion?
Commissioners, we'd be looking at
we need to know
January,
when.
I'm sorry?
January the 5th at 5:30.
January the 5th?
PM.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Sutton? What was your comment?
At the time.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Would that be sufficient time for you to do
Yes.
whatever massaging you need to do?
Yes.
I move to grant a continuance in case ARC 21-407 for the property located at 606 South Boulevard to the January 5th, 2022 public hearing at 5:30 p.m.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please state aye and raise your hand indicating so. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Moving to our next agenda item, which is ARC 21-425. This is for the address of 1820 West Richardson Place. This is in the Hyde Park Historic District. The zoning classification tied to this parcel is RS60. The request in front of you this evening is for a certificate of appropriateness for site improvements. There's some raised planter boxes. There's a pergola and arbor. The obelisk has been removed from this request. Moving to the photo presentation, starting with the Sanborn map. Property in question is highlighted in the green parcel. It is on the corner of Albany and Richardson. It's a very large parcel. It does have a contributing structure that dates back to 1926. If you look at the parcel, there's 2 structures that were here in 1926. This structure has been removed, and they have a generous side yard to the, I'm going to call it the east. As we continue with the photo presentation, this is from above. As I indicated, that second structure on the site was removed. Now it is where the pool is, and then you have this generous side yard to the east of the property. Looking at some photos, this is the Dutch Colonial, which is the contributing structure. This is looking from Richardson and at the porte-cochere. Just looking at another angle of the structure. This is the north elevation and this is the eastern. Looking straight on, you see the yard that's to the left of this picture. You see the columns and fencing that's associated with the encompass of the parcel. Behind the fencing, there was a structure that was started, but it's halted, and they're here in front of you to ask for a certificate of appropriateness. This is looking at some of the structures in the immediate vicinity. This is to the east of the subject site. Looking across Richardson to the north. And once again to the north. That concludes the photo presentation. At this time, we'll have the landscape architect address the board.
Madam Chair, before we start, could we go ahead and administer another swear-in so that we could move the hearing along, please?
If anyone has not been sworn in, please stand up so that you may be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you'll be providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Meg Whitmer. I'm the landscape architect for the project. This is my first time on the other side of the dais, so bear with me. I'm a little tech challenged with this thing. Okay, as Mr. Vila said, this is a garden, a formal garden in the vacant lot to the east of the contributing structure. This particular sketch is inside the fence. You wouldn't necessarily see this from the sidewalk. Here's the site plan. It shows that the front setback of the contributing structure is 17 feet and 6 inches, and the garden structure on the north side is 56 feet and 6 inches, and that structure is a pergola, an arbor. The rear setback is 20 feet. Actually, I learned during the process that Albany is actually the front property line, so the rear property line is the east property line. 20-foot setback in that arbor is also 20 feet. The interior of the site is, the food garden is set on crushed shell with a brick border. The rest of the garden is lawn around that. An existing landscape around the house will remain as is. There will be a generous buffer along the street behind the fence with magnolias and fruit trees. The buffer itself is roughly 10 feet from the fence into the garden. So, and here's a detail of the garden layout key. There are 2 foot high by 2 foot wide by 10 foot long whitewood planters on the north and south end of the garden. And on the east and west side, those planters are 2 foot high, 2 foot wide, and 14 feet long. Inside the garden area are 2 foot height by 4 foot wide by 8 foot long whitewood planters. So they're all the same height. Those aren't subject to setback issues. What is subject to the setback is the arbor and the pergola. Not setback, but structures. So the arbors are 56 feet by 6 inches from the front and then 20 feet from the back. And the other two are not relevant to this issue. Here is a detail of the pergola. It's 10 foot height by 10 foot wide, 10 square. It will be white, treated pine. It's treated pine and it will be painted white. All of the elements of the garden will be painted white to match the trim of the house. And this is the arbor. There will be 4 of them, north, south, east, west, as entries into the interior of the food garden. And in the center of the food garden is the 10 by 10 pergola. So this one as well, trying to match the classic style of the neighborhood and certainly to be consistent with the style of the house. All of these garden elements will be painted white. So this is a view from the sidewalk if you're walking east. The fence, the metal fence with the brick columns will be covered with blue sky vines. Right now there isn't anything growing on that, but the owner wishes to have flowering vines along the fence. And then inside the fence will be southern magnolias and several fruit trees with the intent of having a complete and opaque vegetative buffer along the street and the sidewalk so that there's privacy in that yard. And this is a cross-section through the center of the garden, showing the rear setback, and then the arbor and the planter, and then the pergola in the center, then the planter, and another arbor going towards the owner's home. This is a photo of the brick edge, and I apologize, I picked up a brick from Lowe's to show you, and I left it in the car, but it basically looks like that. We're using a heavier brick as a border to contain the garden, and I have a sample of the shell mulch that will be used inside the garden. The shell mulch matches what the owner currently has in her garden around the house. So to the extent that I can match everything that she already has and use components and styles that match the house, that's what we've tried to do. And finally, this is a picture of one of the planters. It's unfinished, it's not painted. We're waiting for approval to move forward and do a final layout. The elements that are in the yard now were placed there just to work on a garden layout. It was merely an exercise in seeing what worked for the client. And I was brought on board to finalize the details so that she could receive a certificate of appropriateness. In summary, I think that we're far set back from the front of the existing house, and so the impact on this lot is minimal compared with what the owner could put there if she sold the lot and had a house built right next to her. It could be pretty massive if somebody was to come in and build a house on that lot. But the owner has chosen to build a food garden in the neighborhood, and neighbors around and blocks away have certainly expressed a great deal of support for something like that in the neighborhood. So with that, I will answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. In your packet, you have 19 letters of support. Want to enter that into the record. And just reading from the Secretary of Interior standards on page 68, a small paragraph deals with the landscaping surrounding historic buildings and contained within individual parcels of land is considered the building site. The site, including its associated features, contributes to the overall character of the historic property. As a result, the relationship between the building and the landscape features within the site's boundaries should be considered the overall planning for the rehabilitation of this project. Staff's finding that this application is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines. Under condition We listed a couple of bullet items there. They're dealing with scale, massing, and setback. All have been sensitively addressed this evening. Along with those conditions, we asked for the illustration of the materials of the structures, not to include the landscaping. There was a lot of landscaping showed this evening associated with the request. As you pare down the request to the structures themselves, this board does not have purview over the landscaping for single-family residential projects. This is zoned RS60, and it is a residential use. So the landscaping, although it was shown, is not something that you will comment on. Stay focused on the structures themselves as you move forward. Thank you, and I'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ron. We'll open up this portion of the hearing to public comment. If there's anyone here who would like to speak for or against the project, you may come up at this time. I believe we have one. And please remember, when you come forward, when you do come forward, to state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Hey, Elizabeth Johnson, 1819 Richardson Place, and that's right across the street. And first of all, I want to say I think that Kathy has really worked hard on this. We're all neighbors. And Miss Hartley, I believe her name is, has put in a lot of effort, as has Kathy. And Kathy is an artist and a very important part of our neighborhood. So these are all really wonderful things. Our concern, and I probably should have said this before, but if I go a little bit over my neighbor, if I can take her minute, but I don't think I'm going to need to go over. Our concerns are threefold. First of all, we want to make sure that everybody understands in the city that this isn't the end. You all have jurisdiction for the design elements of this. And the reason why we're here is because initially they did not notice a certificate of appropriateness, and now they have, and they're trying to catch up, and that's good. There's also a permitting lane that still has to happen. The structure, I think, is 864 square feet, so there are issues for tying and permitting, but I understand from talking to a lot of city people that what happens is the certificate of appropriateness comes first, then following that, you have those other issues that may relate to building and hurricane tying. Our alarm was that this went up without an understanding, at least on my perspective, of what the whole process was going to do, and this was like days before Elsa. I have a very historic house too. It's right across the street, and when Hyde Park, it was one of the ones shown in the picture, and of course when Hyde Park was platted, our driveways are back to back. You know, we all try to be courteous, pulling out and everything, but the last remaining thing I want to say, so we have the certificate of appropriateness issue, we have the later permitting, and we have a community garden concern. And it was stated here that a lot of neighbors are in support of a vegetable garden. She has said this is a residential use. Obviously, if she wants to have people over to plant or have a glass of wine or something like that, that's fine. But other people bringing dirt in, which was conveyed at some point, this has been kind of a 5-month process, would not be what we wanted to see. May I take Sherry's minute if she's at 1821?
If you haven't gone through the process of that, there's a process for having someone else's time.
Okay, well, I'll conclude by saying this certificate of appropriateness, the most important thing is what they presented, what they're actually going to do, because it's been many months of a different idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? It looks like we do have one more. Yes, please, sir. Your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Gregory Morgan. I live at 1815 West Richardson Place, sort of diagonally from Kathy's house. my official word that I sent you is, we live across the street, 3 houses down from the subject property, and have lived in our house for over 15 years. We believe that the proposed improvements are very appropriate to the historic characteristics of the house on the subject property, as well as the surrounding neighborhood. The proposed improvements will enhance the streetscape and further beautify our street. Further, we believe that the mass and scale of the proposed improvements are very appropriate to the subject property and the surroundings, and note that the setbacks are appropriate. We look forward to the enhancement to our neighborhood. That's the official thing, and that's what I sent you. Otherwise, Kathy is awesome. She's incredible in the neighborhood. She's the place where people go for holiday celebrations or whatever. And it's just to me, it's such a simple structure from what I've seen. And it does have to go through the process. And I love that you guys are here. But man, I hope it goes through, because it'll be an incredible improvement to our neighborhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone? We have another one. Please come forward.
Good evening. Joe Seibel, 1409 South Albany Avenue.
Spell your last name, sir.
S as in Sam, E-I, V as in Victor, O-L-D. Now in our second decade on 1409, kitty corner to Kathy can see her house and the yard from our front yard. I submitted a letter, and I believe it may have been after the deadline. I apologize. So I thought I'd read it now. I write in support of Kathy Durden's quest to improve both her home and our neighborhood through the construction of a beautifully designed garden space. Kathy, a close neighbor and generous friend, aspires to transform her pedestrian grass lot into something extraordinary. And with this plan, that vision comes to life. Ms. Durden is a generous community member, a passionate champion of Hyde Park, and tireless volunteer in support of this neighborhood. Her eye for beauty is widely acknowledged, and her garden will mirror her taste and sensibility. From my front porch, I can see what has been installed so far, and I am inspired. I'm excited for the project to be completed. In an era where man is ever more disconnected from the earth, Kathy desires nothing more than to organically grow vegetables, herbs, and flowers. What an impressive example she will set for all in this way. And I'll just add that I believe that what should be considered tonight is only what was volunteered by Kathy's agent, not anything that may have been discussed before. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing no one else, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and we will ask questions. So, does anyone have a question of the agent?
I have no question.
I just have one.
Ms. Whitmer?
Knowing the structure will probably have to be tied down for wind
Yes,
loads,
we're
are
aware
there
of
any
that.
exposed footers?
Pardon?
Are there any elevated footers that we may not be aware of?
Not to my knowledge, no.
I have no questions.
Thank you.
I have none either.
Thank you.
So, seeing no more questions, we'll go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing, and...
She's allowed to have
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You may rebut. You have 5 minutes if you'd like. Anything that's been in the public portion you may respond to.
Well, I'd like to say that Kathy has been very diligent about making sure that she does everything the right way. Certificate of appropriateness, we've gone through pre-hearing this Hyde Park design review meeting, and I've talked to people in the building department about what's next. So I have an understanding of what is needed, and certainly Donnelly Bailey, the contractor, does as well. So he's aware of the next steps in order to get a permit all of the structures. We also are aware that they have to have a hurricane rating, so the footers have to be signed and sealed by a structural engineer, which Mr. Bailey is aware of and has somebody that will review our footer detail and do that for the permit. So we're going by all the rules and regulations, and I certainly hope that the rest of you feel the same way. So.
Thank you. We will close the public hearing and the commissioners will discuss the case. Anything significant that we need to hone in on here or any concern?
I know exactly how we got here. It's a little trap a lot of people, fall into with the miscellaneous structures they plan to have for their homes. If it's tied to the ground, it needs to meet the code. And if it's in a historic district, it has to come here. And that's just the way it is. It adds that layer of complexity for everybody. We can live with that. My only comment is there's a certain open laciness to the proposal of the constructions proposed for this garden area. And I find those to be quite sympathetic in many ways to certain characteristics of the existing house, particularly its porte cochere, its detailing, the detailing for the front entrance, fence work that we see on portions of the site. I think it's a good fit.
Okay. Anyone else?
I wish that the planter boxes were green, but I have no
We're green.
complaints.
The green material that will grow in them will probably cover that up. But,
No, I think they're gonna get dirty, frankly, but
Eventually they will.
however, I think it's a really lovely proposal. It's, we're not adding any condition space here, very little impervious. And so I think that we have done all that we need to, and so I think that,
would you like to make a motion? If we're ready.
Yeah.
I think so.
And I believe, we're not, never mind. Go ahead.
Give me a moment here, okay.
Top of the page.
Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-364.
No, it's 425.
Oh, 425, okay. Yes. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-425 for the property located at 1820 West Richardson Place, because based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park Historic District Design Guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons. Its massing, its use of proper buffering, and its location within the site.
Have a second?
I will second that motion.
All in favor, please state aye and raise your hand indicating so. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Congratulations. We'll move on to the last case on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. That is ARC 21-491. It's for the address of 821 South Oregon Avenue. It is in the Hyde Park Historic District. The primary structure dates back to 1916, as well as the accessory structure. The zoning is RS 60. This request has two phases. The first phase is for demolition of a contributing accessory structure. I had spoken to the agent, and we're going to focus on the demolition first. They'll have 30 minutes to do their presentation. If the demolition is approved, then we could go into the certificate of appropriateness for new construction for an accessory structure with site improvements. Attached to your staff report is Chapter 27, 116F 1 through 3, that has the criteria that must be met for the demolition of an accessory structure, as well as the report associated with that request. Moving to the photo presentation. Property in question is in the green highlighted area, does face Oregon. You have Morrison to the south, you have Dakota to the west, and there is an alley. Looking at the Sanborn map, this is the 1916 reference for the accessory structure. It's a one-story auto, as indicated. Just looking from above, there you see the canopy of some trees that will come into play through the presentation. This is looking at the front facade of the primary structure. This is looking at the south elevation and moving around to the north elevation. This is looking down the vehicular access, the ribbon drive. Moving to the accessory structure, it has this visor here that's non-historic. The historic part is just the envelope of the building itself. This is just a tighter shot looking from within the visor. This is the interior elevation. This is the rear yard. This is the alley over here. Just looking at some of the conditions. This is the alley exposure. It's a little closer shot. That will be part of the documentation submitted for the demolition. And just to conclude, the condition of the alley. It is a drivable alley and is heavily used for solid waste. At this time, Mr. Michelini will address the demolition portion only at this time. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. Steve Michelini representing Blake Casper on this request first for the demolition, and I have been sworn. Going through the criteria regarding demolition, were there alternatives discussed regarding the relocation as planned? Is it possible? And we have an engineer's report that's included in your package, which indicates basically that the structure is so unstable that it could not be reasonably relocated or restored. Could it be retained on site? We have a grand tree, which I'll show you on the overhead. A grand tree which is just a few feet to the north of the existing structure. There is no foundation for this accessory structure. It is simply the side walls are set on a stack of bricks. The only concrete that we could find, and that was including after excavation, was that there was some poured concrete for the ribbon drive, which is inside the structure itself. If you look at this overhead again, this limb extends out over the existing garage, and it goes away into the existing site. So we have some severe site constraints. With respect to the rehabilitation of this structure, there's also, as noted, there's an engineer's report that indicates that it is significantly compromised by termite damage, wood rot, and the fact that there is no traditional foundation for this structure. It's 200 square feet, and it's listed on the property appraiser's office as a value of about $1,700. The property itself, and I'll go into the details regarding the cost benefit value later on, but the property was purchased for $1.2 million. So that means that this structure is valued at less than 1% of the total value of the structures on the property. If you'll focus on, if you're looking at the book, the small booklet is the demolition booklet. The bigger plan that you have is for the actual certificate of appropriateness for the renovations and the addition of a new accessory structure. Could it be retained on site? The answer is no, it cannot be retained on site. You can't relocate it, it would collapse. The interior structures are in such poor condition they would not support that. There is some tilting of the structure itself, and the remaining of the structure is fairly compromised. The demolition costs, is it justified? Is there an economic hardship? The demolition costs alone are estimated at $25,000, $562, and you're thinking, wow, that's awfully high. Well, it's high because the existing grand tree dictates that you cannot get equipment in there to do it. It has to be all hand done and hand excavated and removed So your labor costs are extremely high. There is an estimate, a detailed estimate included in the package. Additional criteria on applications of a certificate of appropriateness to relocate. When the applicant wishes to relocate, there is no possibility of relocating. You could not get a piece of equipment in there to try to lift it. The foundation, as I said, doesn't exist. The columns for the existing building rest on stacks of bricks. The contributing building or structure in its present setting, if repairs are feasible. There are no feasible means of repairing this building. It would have to be torn down and replaced exactly in the same spot. You could not put a foundation in there because of the root spread and the health of the tree that's immediately adjacent to it to the north. Our arborist has evaluated the tree and has determined that the condition of the tree in a arborist sense is a B class 6, which means it is a very healthy tree. The removal of this structure will add additional light and air to the tree and allow it to probably improve to a higher classification. And we have some pictures to show you in a minute. The contribution of the building to the structure in its present setting, based upon the value of the property appraiser's office, as well as the usability of this structure, it contributes very little to the building. And our plans are, although this is not related directly to the demolition, it is related to the restoration. That will be contained entirely and remodeled, rebuilt in its existing shape and form, size, using the same type of materials, all wood throughout, so that we will be mimicking and repairing the existing structure as it sits in place. Define the plans. Can we remove the structure? Yes, we can remove it, given the approval of this board, and the new construction can begin as soon as 30 days after the removal. And the 30 days includes the removal of the building. So we need time for permitting and things like that, but but the demolition could occur and be completed within 30 days. We examined the possibility of trying to relocate the building, and as I said to you, that's B under Section 2 of your demolition criteria. The structure is not stable enough. You would have to build a foundation underneath the existing structure in order to lift it, and then relocating it would be compromised by the tree roots and the overhanging limb that I showed you a picture of. The compatibility of the building and structure to the proposed is it adjacent to the property. That's D. The size and pattern of this is typical for a smaller 1916 garage that was built. It was no longer compatible, no longer feasible to be used. The economic hardship, as I said, the property sold for $1.2 million and is carried on the value of the property appraiser at $1,700. It's contributing to the existing property. Also told you about the $25,000 for the removal and the demolition. Quite honestly, I questioned that number too, because it's a high number. But when I was told, and it was explained basically that you have to remove everything by hand, then it becomes a little more understandable. There is a report in there from a licensed engineer that shows on your page. That's on page 2 of your folder. And the garage structure has sustained substantial damage. The structure is substantially damaged by the existing siding, which is only partially there, as well as the lateral load and shear element of the lateral load especially has been reduced by more than 33%. So the structural integrity has been compromised. The existing building code, in order to bring this up to code, would be virtually impossible without rebuilding the entire structure, making it not feasible. And the fact that you can't build a new foundation in this area because of the 20-foot protective radius, and then the root system that's underneath there that's already compromising the concrete pads for the driveway would make it unfeasible. Work is classified as substantial and would follow as the existing building code, section 406. Work is classified as non-compliant required structure. The damage of the structure was caused by the termite damage and moisture intrusion and wind loadings, and I'm sure that we have some contributing issues because of the tree and the tree limbs that have fallen on this over time. This would require all of the existing walls to be rebuilt, entire new foundations and slab, strapping of the windows to be added throughout. New windows, new doors would need to be installed. The existing roof framing would need to be retrofitted to satisfy the lateral load for wind loading requirements. A new roof would be required and a new wood ridge beam, and the existing rafters, all the collar ties and the end gables would have to be replaced, making it completely unfeasible. We conclude that the amount of structural work and damage, deterioration and noted throughout the structure would make this restoration difficult and costly. It would not be possible for many of the structures at this current location. The letters are also included in here from the arborist, which indicate the protective radius as well as the overhanging limb that protrudes from north to south. And it takes up approximately 40%, somewhere between 35 and 40% of the rear yard. And I'm going to get into that as well, but regarding why we're requesting that the new accessory structure be placed further to the south. There's also a report in here from the wood deterioration from the termite control termite company that indicates the extent of the damage. And I'm going to refer you back now to the overhead projector. If you look at this picture here, this is the only existing portion that we found where there was any concrete. This was the excavated portion where we're showing root damage that's protruded underneath the edge of the wall. This is the section showing you the interior, the condition of the siding, and termite damage, wood rot. Missing siding, and I would like just to note that this owner purchased this property in May of this year, so it wasn't through negligence of his that caused this damage. And you can see this is historic. You couldn't have made that damage occur within a matter of a few months. And then again, just going through the remainder of the criteria, relocating of this structure to another location on the site would have to be completely rebuilt, as I said earlier. And due to the size of the building, that's 200 square feet, it would not provide any relevant value to this owner or to the property in general. The applicant has the ability to propose new construction within a reasonable period of time. We're prepared to have the demolition completed within a month, which was the 30 days I referenced, and start a new cottage house immediately once we have received permits. Unfortunately, permitting takes a little while now, but the demolition could occur very quickly. Is the demolition justified with respect to economic hardship? In the current location, size and the condition of the garage has no value, and it is functionally obsolete. The economic criteria, this is not an income-producing property. You have on here, this is the detail that I was referring to regarding the demolition. And if you look at the bottom line, the total estimate for demolition, $25,562. And then all the details are provided for you in the report. This is the engineer's report, which is the conclusions that were based upon their analysis. There's a much more detailed report that was submitted and supplied to you online that goes into the details regarding the structural integrity of the entire property. However, this specific letter was addressed only to the garage. And if you look down at this, the highlighted section, the damage to the structure was caused by termite damage, moisture, and any substantial improvements to this would have to go through permitting. There would be no construction that would have to comply with all of the current codes. And this would be the entire existing exterior portions of the building, entire new foundations, and including all of the hurricane standards, which would require strapping, as well as the wind loads for the windows. There was one window that exists on one side, and also would include a new roof. You've also, in your package, you have the letter from the arborist, which is up here, and this is the letter that I referred to earlier with the termite damage and how extensive that was. Going into the economics, the market value of the property, both in its current condition and the completion of the demolition, the demolition would have negligible effect upon the value of the property. The appraisal that we had, current value of the detached, with the detached structure is $1,280,440, and the estimated value without is $1,272,240. It's negligible. The property was purchased, as I said, in May of 2021, $1,250,000. There is no relationship and has not been a relationship between the seller and the buyer, Blake Casper. The rest of the questions regarding income producing is not relevant. The property appraiser's office, if you look, this is also included in your package. Shows the wooden garage at 200 square feet and $2,700 of economic value for tax purposes. So going back through the checklist, we provided you with an engineer's letter, we provided you with an arborist letter, we provided you with a demolition letter from the contractor who has established the value for the demolition. We have provided you with the information regarding the current appraised value and the contributing value of the detached structure. The picture that Ron showed you, and this is a little different one, the front portion of this canopy was probably installed sometime in the 40s or 50s and has no contributing value whatsoever. We're dealing with severe structural and site constraints because of this limb that extends almost 30 feet into the site, and the grand tree that is immediately adjacent to the existing structure. It's damaged what foundation might have been there, but we can find no traditional foundation. I think that I have covered everything that's contained in the requirements for the request for demolition. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. And again, you have a copy of the entire report that I've just presented to you.
Thank you, sir. We'll have staff present the report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. There is one letter that came in late this afternoon that's in your packet. It does address the demolition and the new construction, so I thought it would be pertinent to include it at this time. Staff received and reviewed this application for demolition to Chapter 27, 116, F 1 through 3, and staff deems that it is complete. We asked for their team to have the professionals come to the public hearing this evening in case the board had any specific questions to any of the people that submitted any of the items into the record. And at this time, I would advise the board just to focus on the demolition at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. If there is anyone present who would like to speak for or against the project, you may do so at this time. Seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close that portion, and we will ask questions. I would like to ask if the structural engineer is here, if he or she could come forward. It looks like, thank you. Could you speak more to the?
He hasn't been sworn in.
Oh, you haven't, I'm sorry. If there's anybody else who came in late and hasn't been sworn in, could you please rise now and?
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give providing this evening is the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So, if you could please discuss what it would take in terms of foundations to deal with the roots that are present from the tree, the neighboring tree, if you were asked to proceed with a design that would include rehabilitating the existing structure. And I just want you to walk through that, what those issues are and how you see that moving forward in terms of an engineering scenario. We've got your report. It talks about the walls, it talks about the existing pieces and parts, but it really doesn't give us a sense of what it would really take to, rehabilitate the existing structure.
Sure. As far as the foundation.
Can you please state your name for the record?
My name's Michael Bormans. Basically, for a garage is maybe a little different than a house, that it's right on grade, where sometimes these older houses, you're lifted up a little bit so you can span beams across. If your garage is on grade, to pour a beam to span over roots and all that, it's all going to be digging down into the ground, and to span any kind of root system and all that, which isn't really feasible in this situation, to have a beam sticking up out of the ground into a garage space, because the structure is not elevated. So that's more problematic for a garage structure as opposed to maybe a residence that's elevated. And then just the proximity to the tree, the way it spans out, you'd have to span quite a distance. The bigger the span, the taller the beam needs to be, the more it protrudes into the structure. So from a foundation standpoint, that's one of the biggest obstacles for a garage on grade as opposed to a house. So that's from a foundational standpoint.
Okay. So I want to move to another discipline. Do we have the arborist here from the, okay. And if you could please, sir, come forward and state your name.
Good evening, I'm Jordan Upcavage.
Hi, Jordan. So following up that line of questioning, can you speak to the presence of the root system in that particular location and whether or not it even makes sense to, from the health of the tree and any specific ordinances regarding those grand trees, if a new structure could even be built within that general vicinity of the existing structure?
Certainly. I'd like to start by telling you that I am a certified arborist, and I also have the City of Tampa self-certified arborist credential, where I'm one of 12.5 arborists that are able to sign off on construction documents in lieu of natural resources. So what's the existing structure is about 7 feet from the edge of this tree. The tree's over 40 inches, and it's a grand live oak. Right now, the City of Tampa code says you can't do any subsurface disturbance within a 20-foot protective radius. So the existing structure right now is about 7 feet. And as arborists, we can use different best management practices to navigate what is tolerable. And a good rule of thumb is about 3 times trunk diameter. So if there was to be root pruning or root cutting within 3 times trunk diameter, it would go against the American National Standards Institute, ANSI, the ANSI A300. So any sort of subsurface pruning to fit in the future or the proposed driveway would be against standard and cause irreparable damage to the subject tree. So we would be effectively irreparably damaging someone else's property, which by law we can't do. So anything within, worst case scenario, 3 times trunk diameter, or the way the City of Tampa Code's written, 20 foot, is going to be viewed as a detriment to the tree. And I'm sure you've seen a tree in a cow pasture uproot. You have a very wide, shallow root plate. And right now the structure is within that root plate. So just a few inches below surface, maybe 4 to 6 inches, it's this bone, this root mushroom, like elephant foot that actually holds the tree up. It's the root plate. And that's what would be interfered with should you try to root prune or put a driveway in this same spot.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone have any questions for the arborist or the structural engineer? Since I already called.
This goes to the structural engineer. So we're talking about a grade beam that would be needed to somehow support this structure. But so it would go on the inside of the structure? Is that the way it would, how would that be installed? Because
It basically, say you have walls around the perimeter,
Mhm.
the grade beam would be under those, supporting those bearing walls. So it'd be kind of in that plane of that wall, but, and it has to span his root zone, which would be problematic, you know, if it's a 20-foot deep garage, if you're trying to put a footer in the corners to span 20 feet, supporting it all up, and you basically have to have a gap below the grade beam, because this is all elevated off the ground.
Mhm.
And how do you have a garage with a 1-inch gap underneath it that would just let things in to the garage? You know, it wouldn't be cut off from the outside elements, I guess.
so the garage would have to be lifted up.
Yes.
It'd have to get a new plate. You'd have to construct this grade beam.
Yeah.
And that grade beam can perhaps have pilings wherever you can manage to fit one in between this massive root system, right?
If I could interject one thing, if you could avoid the limb that overhangs the top of the roof. So when you're considering lifting, then you start compromising the amount of height that you can go up, because I showed you the picture of that limb that comes out directly over the top of the existing garage.
Mm-hmm.
How far is that limb from the ground at its closest point?
11, 12 feet.
Can you come to the mic so that it gets on the record? Sorry.
The limb is 11 or 12 feet above grade where it sits now. The limb, if it were to be cut, it would be about an 18-inch diameter cut. To make a proper cut at the branch collar, we would have to have permission to cross the neighbor's property to make a proper cut. Without permission, we can't trespass, therefore there would be a heading cut, which is just a stub right at the property line, leaving a nub of wood that would be dead, and it's 5 feet long. And removing that 18-inch diameter branch would not be in harmony with the City of Tampa Natural Resources Allowance.
Well, as an arborist, would that be harmful to the health of the tree if that were an option?
It would be an added stress. I would not recommend doing so. I would take a less is more approach, retain as much living foliage on the tree as possible.
Okay. Other questions?
You mentioned the driveway. Were you really referring to the structure, or are you referring to the driveway?
There is a ribbon driveway that leads to the structure. So if you were to put a driveway underneath the structure, or a foundation under the structure, better worded, any foundation or below surface
So
element.
laying a slab on grade, which is 4 to 6 inches thick, depending on the load that you're putting on it, is that a problem for the root system?
Yes, it is. City of Tampa, you can't go within 20 feet of that tree.
Even
and
with a 4-inch slab?
Even though it's already got a roof structure above it?
Right, but you're not inhibiting gas exchange with the root structure. The roots can still breathe, but putting concrete over it would inhibit gas exchange. And if you were to do so, I would expect that concrete to break as those roots continue to grow in diameter.
I have a question for the team overall. Is it correct that it is only ribbon strips of concrete that go through this garage, not a full slab of concrete? Because it looks like in one of the images, it's on page 5, the upper image.
It's a combination of,
It looks like there's
it's a
concrete on
combination.
the sides and brick in the middle.
it's a combination of brick and concrete. That's correct. The ribbon drives exist on the exterior, and then the interior portions are filled with brick.
Right, okay. So currently, the root system has concrete and brick pavers on top of it inside the garage structure, correct?
Could this structure be supported from the interior?
Again, I don't, based on the roots, I don't know how you would support with a grade beam system from a garage standpoint without having a void wrapping around the base of the structure. It'd be kind of sitting on stilts with you don't want the foundation system to interrupt his root, and you have to speak on the root part of it, but the basis of the grade beam is to keep it elevated off the ground. And while anything can be supported, I don't think it would be a practical solution for a garage that's on the ground, that's supposed to be on the ground.
So that if the owner is looking for a truly enclosed accessory structure, that's problematic from the owner's standpoint. Is that correct?
Could you say that again?
So what we're hearing is, in order to make this feasible, if the direction was given, let's try to figure out a way to work with the existing structure, and you had to rebuild some sort of support system for the walls, let's say. It sounds as if you would have to put in posts, and then there would be a gap between the grade and the bottom of the walls.
And we'd run into a couple of problems. First, you'd have to put in some piers of some sort to support it, and then try to figure out where those piers could go. You would have to hand excavate all the way around that radius and the footprint of the existing structure. And then we run into the issue of it would have to be elevated. And then the second part would be that how do you deal with the height constraint because of the limb that's crossing over the top. So we have a very constrained area that we can do anything with it. And again, it's relatively small. It's 200 square feet. It does not add to the overall value of the property significantly. And we're trying to make the best situation out of a very compromising location. I don't know how, we examined that with the structural engineer, with the arborist, with the contractor. How do we get to where we want to be? And the safest solution for the tree and for the property was to remove it, expose that area that's covered with concrete now, and then relocate the proposed accessory structure to the other side of the property. Okay. And that takes us outside of the protective radius, and it takes us outside of the limb spread that we need to protect as much as possible. And I think you all heard me say that in the post condition, that tree will be healthier than it is currently, and we don't run the risk of continual disruption of the structure itself with the roots. They're already I think I showed you the picture, but they're already poking up and pushing up the side wall. And although I don't know for sure, but I suspect that the siding that was broken off the side of the building was probably forced up because of the pressure from the root, and it popped it off.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for the agent or the rest of the team?
I just want to ask one more question of the arborist. Is it not a difficulty when any construction is taking place, either new construction or standard demolition? is that not going to compact the soil around the roots and also stress the tree?
Let me make sure I
Any kind of heavy equipment close to this area is going to compact the soil around the roots and stress the tree. Is that correct?
Of course. That's why I believe that it's proposed that the structure be demolished by hand.
All right, thank you.
I think that concludes I think the commissioners are, we're good, right? So we'll go ahead and close that portion, and you have 5 minutes for a rebuttal, Mr. Michelini.
Unless you have some further questions, I think we've covered everything that's required by the code. And we brought the experts here, and I think they have effectively answered all of your questions and addressed them in a professional way. The structural engineer has told you there's no practical way of rebuilding, and the arborist has said basically the same thing. There's no practical way of saving this structure. And I have already put on the record it's relatively small, does not contribute to the overall value significantly of this property, and we would respectfully request that you approve the demolition.
Thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and we will discuss the case if anybody has concern.
Can I add one more thing? That the homeowner association.
I'm sorry, I need to reopen it if you want to, because you didn't.
I think you have the letter that Ron put on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I believe we do.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I have it here. All right, sorry, commissioners, if there is a concern or a comment that we need to discuss. Mr. Myers?
Demolition is always difficult. We have already seen that tonight. However, in this case, we have a chance to do something very good for a grand tree. The alternative would seem to be demolition by neglect if
Well, you're already there.
yeah, we're very close, yes. But the owner has been very upfront. He said, I bought this, 5 months ago or whatever. Within the past, in 2021, he has encountered this difficulty. He's looked, the experts have looked at it very carefully and have said that this would, that we can't do much underneath this tree. And I am very much in favor of assisting the tree. Therefore, I'm in favor of demolition.
I like trees too, but I also like our historic properties as well. And you are correct that this is not necessarily demolition by neglect, but as a utility structure, they do have a long history of being neglected to the point where they want to fall down from their own. My biggest concern is, I remember working years ago with the emergency management people. They would be looking at a structure like this as part of a debris field in a major hurricane, a major windstorm. At what point would, if we even leave it as it is right now, where it will become a hazard to other properties in the area?
Any other comments? Have it entertain a motion by anyone? Yes, please. Maybe?
Your turn to practice.
Pick the right one. So which one am I using here?
Very bottom page first.
Oh, okay, I see it now. Yeah.
Pardon.
New here. All right, I move to grant a certificate of appropriateness to demolish for ARC or the property of ARC 21-491 located at 821 South Oregon Avenue, inasmuch as the agent has satisfied the requirements of Chapter 27, Section 27, 116 F of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances, and that the agent has shown burden of proof based on the economic hardship, as well as the basis of trying to save the tree. Do I need to be more particular?
It would be more appropriate to state that it was infeasible to relocate or reuse the structure.
As it will be more feasible to relocate the structure to another location on the property.
Infeasible.
Infeasible to locate the property or the project to a new location on the property.
Have a second on the motion?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. So we'll move on to the certificate of appropriateness in this case. Somebody take this.
Okay, which one's mine? Which one's yours?
Here's the file.
There we go.
Give me a second here to move from one folder to the next.
Absolutely.
Okay, do I need the handheld or can you hear me? On the location? Yeah, I'm not worried about that. Yeah, that's fine. Excuse me. Now we're back on the design package that you all have. On the first page, you'll see that we have the survey and the existing structure. This is the current location of the garage. We conducted analysis on how best to locate that structure so that it didn't interfere with the tree or was not in conflict with the limb, the overhead limb. So we started with this scenario, and then we gradually moved the proposed accessory structure southward. And everything that you see here was coordinated with the arborist to ensure that we had the protective radius, and you'll see that drawn here. That obviously this was within the protective radius. This one was just barely touching the protective radius. This was barely touching the protective radius. And then this location, which is more typical for the location of an accessory structure, was moved southward, and it would meet the accessory structure setbacks. Now, one of the questions that came up previously was why in this location, and why couldn't we move things over here? Well, we have a grand tree here on the sidewalk, and we have another tree here. So we're compromised on the location by the trees themselves, and also on the site. So by moving it up there, we get outside of the protective radius of the existing grand tree on the north side. We don't interfere with the grand tree out here, and we don't interfere with the other, this is a 28-inch live oak here. So we're all within the protective areas. We're sandwiched in between where we should be with respect to the site location. Let me ask a question. Should I be going through materials for the renovation of the home as well as the proposed accessory structure? No.
Whatever's on,
No, I understand.
whatever's noticed today.
I understand. So, this is where we were proposing to construct a new accessory structure, 2 stories, and it'll be separated from the house. There is an eave-to-eave consideration here. The stairwell is proposed to be here with a covered entryway. On your next sheet, which is 3.1, we're showing the west view, which is from the alley side, with the lower level doors and the windows. All the windows throughout this accessory structure proposed will match, and they are also compatible with the windows, the size and scale of the windows for the existing structure. If you look at this on this side, this is the east side of the proposed addition, and it has a stairwell, or stairs, and the stair railings that will match the historic nature of the building. On the south side, we're showing the brackets all the way across, and that they also will mimic what's existing in the existing home. You see the stairway on the north elevation, you see the stairway here, the lower level doors and the windows that all match. We've provided you with a wall section showing how this will be built, and includes the rafters and rafter tails as we've discussed previously. We've reviewed the samples of the materials with the staff, and we're providing you with the samples to match the existing on the house. And again, the restoration will include all wood windows, all wood siding, and the siding dimensions will match the existing home. This is a typical fence that we're proposing, and again, this fence will be the same perimeter fencing throughout the project. We provided you with additional materials. We've given you a detail regarding the brackets, the detail regarding the stairs, and the lighting, hardware, and fixtures. This is more details regarding fixtures and associated with the house. This is the lighting fixtures. And you have a floor plan for the second and the first levels of the structure. We've met with staff and gone through the entire project as it relates to compatibility with the size, the scale, and the materials. And again, the windows will match, they're all wood. The doors will match, they're wood. The siding will match the existing house. The only discussion that we had that was not clear, and we can't figure it out exactly, but it looks like the siding is mitered on the corners as opposed to having a banding. So we're proposing to miter the corners as they match for the siding. Just give me a second here. I want to make sure that we've addressed all the issues that the staff has identified. It is a contributing structure. The new structure will imitate the existing contributing structure. The size, scale, height, and width, and the proportions of it do match what is proposed for the site. The setbacks will be maintained in accordance with the traditional setbacks for accessory structures. The orientation and site coverage is appropriate. The front of this will actually face to the east. The alignment, the rhythm, and spacing mimics the traditional size and location for other properties in the area. The trim and the detail will match. The facade and proportions and the window patterns are exactly the same. Entrances and porches and the projections and size will remain the same as those for the house. The roof form, shape, and pitch will match that of the main structure. Everything that you see in terms of quality of craftsmanship and materials will match the existing house. As a condition, the staff has indicated we should meet with them prior to the public hearing. We've met with the staff a couple of times and reviewed these plans in detail. We've discussed the documentation regarding what we're proposing on this location. We've submitted the railing detail, trim, and corner boards, and also for the windows and doors as provided for by the code. The final solution of materials, height, and location design, we will be reviewing that as a final review with the city staff prior to submitting for permitting to ensure that we have complied with the Hyde Park guidelines for the overlay. We increased the overhangs according to the staff comments, and we provided the brackets as well as the rafter tails, and including the specific design for the rafter tails with them, which we will review with them in advance of the permit package. The exterior wall materials and finishes, as I said, will be the same. We've also submitted to them the proposed roofing material and asphalt type of shingle, which again will match what is on the main house. Porch materials, including ceiling and deck, is lapboard, and we'll use the same type of lapboard pattern and size for the existing structure. We're going to match that for those that have to be restored, and anything that's required for the accessory structure that's proposed will also be planned to meet those same specifications. I'll be happy to answer. I think I've covered everything in the package. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, and we remain available.
Thank you. We'll move on to the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Just to reiterate the request this evening, on this portion of the request is for new construction for the accessory structure with site improvements. I just wanted to touch upon the challenges that this particular site has with the tree. In working with their team, we looked at different site locations for the new accessory structure outside of the protective radius. As you get just right outside of the protective radius, it's not possible to come down the Ribbon Drive and park into the accessory structure with the location, with the 20-foot radius that is there. And then it put the accessory structure in the middle of the backyard that kind of bifurcated the backyard. That's very atypical in a pattern in Hyde Park. So the other solution was to move it to the other side of the parcel that is more consistent. This structure here is not for vehicular storage. They do meet City of Tampa parking for 2 spots on site, and they meet preservation standards, 2 cars behind the front yard setback. I think he has it on his plans. He could show you the existing ribbon drive. The intention is to continue the ribbon drive towards the rear and then out the alley. They're going to put the gate there that there's no site triangle. As part of this request, I'd like for him to go through the site plan and show the location of the fencing to accommodate sensitivity and transportation standards with the site triangle. This application is consistent with the Hyde Park Design Guidelines with the plans that we reviewed on September 17th, 2021. If this project is to move forward, there is a design exception that needs to be applied for through the zoning department, and that is for the height of the accessory structures from 15 foot in height, which is city code anywhere outside of the historic districts. Inside the historic districts, you could go to 22.5 feet. That's the cap. If anybody asks for more than that, it would come back as a variance. So administratively, we allow the 22.5 foot with discussion through land development and preservation. That concludes my portion. I'll be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ron. Now open up the hearing to public comment. If there's anyone who would like to come forward and speak forward or against this project. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close that portion, and we'll begin to ask questions. Commissioner Sutton.
Yes, sir. I do have a question. I finally figured out what you're all doing with your fence and with your gate.
You want me to show you here?
Yes, because I do have one question. Because I understand what you're doing with the inset for the driveway apron. So that you have the sight lines going in and out of the alley. But what is happening with the fence inset behind the new accessory structure? Because on your plan 5.1, I see that this back corner room is intended to be storage, and there's an intention to have here a French door accessing that from the alley. And that strikes me as being a personal security issue.
Why is that like that?
Can I address?
Yeah.
Please.
Your name, sir?
I'm Dion Stoltzfus, DCS Custom Homes, contractor for the project. There's a French door for storage for
Yes.
bikes and miscellaneous, and that is not accessible to the living space.
That is correct. But it is accessible only from the alley.
That's correct.
You don't have a problem, and your client doesn't have a problem with the security issues?
I think the question is how do you access that if you're the homeowner? You have to go out into the alley and around?
Correct, because the idea is you're going out for a bike ride, so to have.
And anyone who wants to go through that door to get your bike ride.
I'm sorry?
And anyone who wants to get through that door, because it's not on your secure site.
It was more important for them not to have access to the living space. So if the door was unlocked, they could get access to anything stored in there that's personal possession. It's not life. So the idea, as a little bit of inconvenience for the owner to walk around, but that was their choice.
Okay.
From a security standpoint.
Next.
The owner's here if you want to ask him.
It's not really in our purview as to whether or not it works for them security-wise. I do have a question generally about, if we go back to the arborist, you know, we talked about putting things on the root system and, you know, for the health and well-being of the tree. The brick pavers will be going down, and you will have to do some sub-base to make that work. So this being a very large tree, and we see that there are very large roots that are impacting the existing structure, how is this going to work? I mean, I could foresee that this is not going to take very long for the roots to damage whatever they put down in terms of a hardscape.
Understood. I can't respond with confidence because I have not had any opportunity for discovery. The structure is existing, and I cannot observe and foresee future issues until the building is gone and we do exploration. We can air spade, we can find where roots are, where they're not, if it's going to work, or if we need to come up with other solutions.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may add to that?
Yes.
Part of the process and landing to this design is, again, giving purpose to that new apron going. So through the driveway, not having the opportunity to put an accessory structure over there or a landing point, we decided with staff to do a drive-through, providing with gates, giving them gates for security and what have you. The final solution for that will be determined and addressed and guidance provided through each step. Through the demo, through the construction process. I know we're concerned about what construction does to this. The neighbor's a very good friend of mine. I care, and I want to make sure it's protected through all processes or all steps. So the final details of what material that is will be directed with staff and the arborist is our intention.
Okay, thank you. So the next big element that I think we need to address is location of the stairs. When we look at historic precedent, stairs that service an accessory structure, they're typically either rear facing the alley, or to the side of the lot. They do not face the front, and I do understand there's a fence in front of that, but fences can go away and landscape can go away over the lifetime of the building and a property. And it's just not consistent with your historic pattern. So if you have precedents, we'd certainly love to see that, but I would like to understand why the stairs ended up where they did.
So going back to our diagram here. Thank you. We identified that in this diagram, in this one, there was no usability for driveway, and from the ARC staff, having a structure in the center of the backyard did not make sense. So it pushed us in this back corner. We also landed that we had to have some type of purpose of this driveway. So we said, okay, we'll do the pull-through driveway. Those gates are very expensive, but it wasn't necessarily a necessity by the owner, but we wanted to appease that. So we landed on having this pull-through driveway. So now with the accessory structure and that driveway, we've just used up all the real estate. So in order to have an accessory structure, to locate it in this direction, just ate up and kind of pushed it back to the center of the property. There is a multifamily, and so that's the main reason, is just landscape. Mr. Casper purchased this to have family in the backyard and have an open space. We're not putting a pool. There's no purpose for that, and just wanted to have some type of real estate back there. So that was the number one reason. The second, right on the back side of this, right next door, is a multifamily parking lot. So very much, it's fine. It's been there. He was aware of that. But if we could use this structure to also screen that. And lastly, when we were notified regarding the staircase concerns, we did go through a number of gyrations for the design of this, pushing that stair on the back side, which forced us to reduce the size of the square footage because the eave-to-eave detail. So it also, security being very important to our client, putting that stairs on the back side, a blind side, totally understand the historical reference there. But someone could easily get across that fence and be standing up there without any line of sight. We're definitely concerned with the security aspect. So balancing the size, the reduction in size of the unit and the security aspect, we would prefer to land on this design.
Okay, thank you.
We did, part of their concerns was lack of windows. We did add those. We did try to hear and make adjustments as they've requested.
Those are my questions for now. Any other?
I've got another quick question for the arborist. On this driveway, now instead of having a structure sitting there, we're gonna have through traffic. Looks like maybe possibly even daily traffic. Is that, what's that gonna do for the Grand Tree?
I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity for discovery. If there are large structural roots that interfere, then we may need to put granite chips in that area and work with what we're dealing with. If there is no structural roots that will be impacted, then there will be no consequence, no negative consequence.
I would assume, Mr. Arborist, you have to come back. So there's pervious concrete, there's brick pavers, there's gravel, there's granite chips. So there's a whole library of possible paving surfaces that could be used within that. And I think that we want to know, because we have really based, or at least in my feeling, we have based the approval of demolition on the fact that the compelling existence of the tree. And so we really don't want to harm that. So we want to make sure, I think, that we put pervious paving there.
And not just that tree, I mean, you look to the other side where this new structure is going, and my question would be, how long before the new structure affects the other tree on the other side?
I don't think anybody can answer that question. I don't know how quickly the tree's going to grow. Size and age don't directly correlate. History of the land is going to be your best guesstimate of age of the tree. The proposed structure is between 10 to 15 feet away from the other live oak, and that is outside the 3 times trunk diameter ANSI standards. So at a 26-inch tree, we're at 6.5 feet, and the proposed structure is more than twice that. So I do not think that in our lifetime there should be an issue with the tree outgrowing its usable space due to the new structure.
And now I'd like to speak to the architecture of the cottage, because you have said that you're going to make everything just like the existing house. I want to point out that there are corner boards on the existing garage, and so it's easier to make a corner board than a miter joint, and I would suspect, and it gives the cottage a little more of the look of an accessory building.
And we don't object to that at all. I mean,
which is consistent with.
You know, what happened was that we really struggled with this. We had a meeting with staff last week, trying to find perimeter photographs of the house. And when I saw those boards, you know, those corner boards on the accessory structure. And we really were going, it didn't really matter one way or the other. So we're perfectly agreeable to making the corner boards on the accessory structure without any objection whatsoever.
And well, I have something else to say, but I'll say it when we're discussing among ourselves.
Any other questions for the agent or anyone else on the professional team?
One of the things that I wanted to address that was part of your question was, until we get into the demolition of that accessory structure, we will not know exactly what materials we could use. But that's why I was suggesting that we leave it up to the staff. But we're perfectly happy to put in granite chips as a surface and allow that to float instead of putting pavers down or pervious concrete or something like that. That will, in fact, as you know, that root is going to push something up. And so the granite chips in there with some kind of a wooden border would probably suffice. So we're not trying to, you know, I know we made a big deal out of the tree and protecting the tree in order to get the demolition approval. So we don't want to go backwards and say, okay, we got the demolition approval, now let's put something else back in that's the same. So that, we're not trying to do that. So, I mean, if you know, the board is agreeable, you know, we can certainly leave it up to staff to be determined at permitting, or, you know, or the granite chips is fine, whichever direction you want to go in.
Thank you.
With respect to the historic context of the stairwells being in the front, we also discussed that with staff. And we're trying to find the addresses now on his cell phone. But I understood there were a couple in the district that have that. They're not the dominant and normal method of the approach and the access to the buildings, but they do exist there. And we certainly request your consideration of that. And if we can't prove that to your satisfaction, then, you know, we'll have to come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to expand one question in this area. I'm going to play the devil's advocate. I understand that you're really not going to know what you are actually contending with until everything is gone and you actually have to do some subsurface investigations and so forth. But
On the accessory structure, I mean.
No, of the existing tree.
Okay.
Tree root system. Let us assume that that the worst case is found and you find a very major, very, very shallow root system where that existing garage is. Are you all prepared to abandon a driveway access to the alley?
The through drive?
Yes.
And I want to make clear, yes, the answer is yes. We were not asking for that. That was a recommendation to give purpose for keeping the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
Once we determined moving the driveway to the opposite side was pretty much unfeasible, then it was recommended that we come up with a purpose for that drive. And it does serve a little bit of convenience for multiple
Agreed.
cars parking. But
Agreed.
that was not our intent initially. We've kind of landed on this, and we do enjoy some of the benefits from it. But again, some of the original desires of the homeowner was a larger backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So if we do just stop and terminate it, then we would benefit from the larger backyard.
Understood.
One of the things I'd like to point out is that transportation came back to us and recommended this scenario that you see in front of you. And then when we met with the preservation staff, they were like, well, you know, same question that you asked. Well, we got a grand tree here, we're trying to protect the grand tree, and that transportation wanted it to be a through drive. If we eliminate the driveway entirely, then we don't have the 2 spaces for the cars that are required. And I guess their concern, transportation I'm talking about, was the distance for the backing for the cars. But we, you know, that's why I said if we can leave that to the staff to determine, once we get into the actual excavation, bring staff out, bring our, you know, arborist out and transportation, we can terminate that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the red line delineating the fence, is that a new fence and gate?
Yes, that's what I
So-
was going to get to in a minute.
So, in reviewing this with staff, Ron, the location of that fence and gate at the existing Ribbon Drive, can that move forward just shy of the front porch? It can, can't it, under the district guidelines? As long as the porch is free and clear.
Correct. The fence and the gate can't come proud. They were leaving that vehicular corridor, I think, uninterrupted. They were putting the fence in the back to encapsulate the cars, or farther back from the front facade. And then the discussion took place that, you know, instead of, if they have 3 cars down that chute and they have to, you know, back them out to exit out the alley, that's why the fence location in the alley is truncated to be 10 foot from the rear and 10 foot in, so you maintain the sight triangle as well.
Right, and I understand the access at the alley and getting through there. I understand all the implications there. But if indeed that doesn't work out after due diligence has been done on the tree root system with the arborist, and you can't maintain a drive-through there, that fence can move forward, so you can comply with the district's requirement guidelines for the 2 spots behind a fence. That's where I was going with that line of questioning. That's correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I think that is an issue that, you know, we have some hanging fruit out here. And, you know, we'd like to move forward if we can and leave that as a, depending on what happens with the excavation, depending on what happens with transportation, leave that issue regarding that fence up to the staff, you know, at the staff
Agreed.
level. And then one other thing I was going to point out is on this side of the property, we're putting that fence there to screen the HVAC equipment, which is existing here, but we'll be adding another unit to service the accessory structure. So that will be screened, and that will be a requirement. So I know that you thought that perhaps in the future that could be removed, but that certainly could be a condition that not be removed and it maintain the screening that's required for HVAC.
What would be removed?
The fence.
No, that wasn't, I wasn't concerned about that fence.
Okay.
I was talking about the fence where the cars were.
Okay, well, that corner, you know, it's obviously it's a problem corner. And there's certain things that we simply don't have an answer for until we get into the, you know, full excavation and permitting process.
Yep.
And that's why I was asking if we could leave that to staff. And you know how diligent staff is. They're not going to let us do something that you've expressed a concern about.
Thank you. Any other questions, something that we may not have seen that we should have seen and you need to see now?
I'm good.
Is it appropriate, while we still have the agent here, I understand that you're looking for places where you can see the stairway, but it also would seem that there are screens, you know, a green wall, you know, a planted wall there that would come up perhaps to the level of the railing on the upper, on the stair landing.
Are you referring to like planter boxes or?
No, I'm referring to something a little more elaborate than that, something that would allow
Landscaping at the ground level?
landscaping at the ground level, perhaps vines that would grow up and screen the whole stairway.
No, not at all. So I don't know if you can see that. So there's no objection to that. We're 100% open to that. We do plan to have a very nice landscape package. But this is also the oak tree that's present, right? So this structure is set back past this. I think it's roughly about 10 feet past this, maybe a little bit more. So, and the street with the 6-foot fence, even closer, probably 10 feet closer to you. So there's already some natural screening. We are 100%, that's why we show landscaping on the plan, and we're willing to work with any type of maturity of trees regarding that.
Or perhaps a wall, you know, simply enclosing the underside of the stairway.
Oh, absolutely.
Where is that view from?
That's from the street on the,
That's on the, that'd be on the south side of the building.
here, I'll show
okay.
site plan.
That's looking west.
So that would be
The other side.
that view's right here of this tree. And I can go to the proposed. On the proposed, that's the photo of this tree right here. So
Okay.
you're looking this way. The current fence is back here.
So that's what we're looking through, is the white fence.
Correct.
Okay.
So we've moved that fence up closer, so from your vantage point from the street, it's going to screen more of the stairs.
Okay.
And you have this oak tree, plus this is the additional landscaping that's required just for the AC. There will be new landscaping plans. We don't have them fully developed, but we're open to any suggestions.
Okay. I do have a question. There was a comment in the staff report, increase overhangs to 2-foot minimum. Ron, is that satisfied now, or is that still a discussion point?
And we made that correction.
Well, they started at 12, they increased it to 18. Part of the staff's comments were to show the dimensional line from the body of the building to the property line to meet City of Tampa code as well. As you have your overhangs, the overhangs still need to be 2 foot clear to the property line. So they're showing 18 inches of the overhangs now.
Oh, I understand. Okay, so that's what that was. Okay. And there's no more, there isn't a round window anymore. I didn't see one. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for the team or the agent? Anyone?
Not me. Thank you very much.
I'm good.
All right. You have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Only if you have any more questions. I think we've covered everything we can cover that's known. We recognize and realize there are some unknowns. We're asking for you to empower the staff to deal with that. And then again, it'll be, we're making a commitment to you to make it sure that it's consistent with your comments and concerns that have been voiced at this hearing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead and close the public hearing and open up our discussion. I kind of want to talk to you a little bit, Commissioner Sutton, since you are a historian and you've certainly got more experience than I do with the Historic Preservation Board. The question of the stairs. It seems to me that we've run into stairs in the front of accessory structures, but I can't be certain. And, you know, we gave the opportunity to present precedent, and they were unable to come up with it in this session. But is there indeed historic precedent within this district?
I think if there's any precedent, we find stairs on all sides of these buildings. We find them as exterior elements, we find them as interior elements. It really is all over the place. If there is a particular trend, there is a general relationship to the location of the stair landing, whether it's enclosed, semi-enclosed, or open, as it is in this case, to a exterior rear porch entry to the primary dwelling. And that could take any one of a number of different orientations. And that is consistent here. But so you take a look at the plan, we have the stair coming down, backside corner, into a central area of the yard in close proximity to that rear porch, where you would expect to have general access to the building, to the upper level of the building, to the main dwelling. And it's not in a bad place. In terms of the aesthetic, first of all, I'm not bothered by the view of this stair, properly crafted from the street side, particularly on a site that's almost 130 feet deep.
Right.
I mean, it's back there. Now, the question, though, being, is the stair as a simple picket set appropriate to a semi-timbered craftsman bungalow? Should we be having something of a more robust?
Well, I think you have to look at the
detailing?
existing structure, though. You have to look at the existing accessory structure and its simplicity. It really doesn't call any reference
Oh, no.
to
But that reference is gone now.
primary. I know, but we look to precedent on the site
Mhm.
first, right? This was a contributing, it's of its time, and I would say that anything that you can do to diminish its capacity to call attention to itself is more in keeping with the existing primary structure.
There is that,
Right.
thought. There is that thought.
Right.
And also there's the other competing thought of a substantial accessory structure and its compatibility with its main original. You don't want to go too far off the field in terms of its detailing and materiality.
Right.
Where there's a stark difference between the two. Now, they're working with rafters and doors and windows and sidings and siding details that are substantially compatible with the existing building. The only thing we have that really, if you want to call it a sore thumb, is that stair.
Well, and we're already going from an accessory structure that was one story to
A
two.
one-story utility structure to an accessory living structure. It's a totally different animal.
Totally different.
Yep.
It's not a bullshit anymore.
Which,
So, Kamari Pettis-Mackel from the legal department, just in remembering your discussion mode and when it comes time for your motion, if there is a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness, recall that staff reminded you that a design exception has to be approved for the height of the accessory structure. So that has to be a condition regarding if you decide to approve this certificate of appropriateness.
and we didn't ask a lot of questions in regards to the height, because there's really no way to reduce the height in order to get the structure, the use that they're.
I thought the height was entirely reasonable for the scale that we were looking at.
Well, they have to get the height, they have to get the design exception
Oh,
to
yes.
get the height.
Regardless.
Have I answered your question, by the way?
Yes, regarding the stairs location, yes. I think simplicity is best. That's my opinion. I think it needs to step back and let the primary structure be the showcase piece. I mean, when you look at the imagery of the existing, of what's there now, and that even if that canopy wasn't there, that carport structure, that existing accessory structure just sits back and says, I'm not that important, right? So, I do think we need the quarter boards. I think just having some reference to the original accessory structure is important. One thing about the windows, you know, I understand referencing the primary structure, but if this is gonna sit back and say I'm not as important as, you know, the original structure, accessory structure has a 4 light, and it's a single. So should it reference that in its language? It's, you know, it's a 2 light with, it's a double hung, it looks like, with 6 light above and 1 below.
That's what's proposed, but you're reminding us that there was just a 4, there was a
Yeah.
2 over 2 on the,
Correct.
on the original garage,
Correct.
on the original shed.
I mean, I guess what's at issue here is it of the primary structure, or is it more in keeping with the existing structure, accessory structure?
I feel like they've hit it pretty well. It is not as a bungalow. It is clearly not a mini bungalow, and I do not feel that that is what's called for.
Right.
And there's a, you know, I'm looking at the front of this, at the front of the main structure, and it has a very large vocabulary of windows.
Agreed.
And so this rear structure with a 6 over 1, it seems to me to be entirely appropriate.
Okay. Any other components that we should discuss or consider?
I'm done.
Well, is anyone ready to
I think I
consider a
have it.
motion?
Noted.
And be very specific if there's any, you know, if it's a motion that takes into consideration either conditions, that we're very clear about those conditions, and don't forget the design exception, please.
Yes. I think, and,
Unless
ladies and gentlemen, I think that we need to state that we need final approval from staff on the location of the driveway gates and paving in the area of the neighbor's grand tree.
Final coordination, yep.
Final coordination. Well, is approval okay, or coordination you want?
It's usually final, coordinate with staff, because
Okay.
There's still some loose strings here.
final fence and driveway configuration
Okay.
at the grand tree location at the rear.
And that staff provide final approval, or that the screening of the stairway be coordinated with staff as well. And that this approval is based on administrative approval of the design exception for height.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think you've hit all the buttons on that.
Okay.
Don't forget the corner boards.
Well, I know that we're gonna get the corner boards.
Still a condition.
Okay. Oh, man. Move to grant a certificate of appropriateness for the drawings and documents presented at this public hearing in ARC 21-491 for the property located at 821 Orleans Avenue with the following conditions. Number one, that this approval is based on the administrative approval of the design exception for height. Number two, that the final location of the driveway gates and the paving in the area of the neighbor's grand tree be coordinated with staff. Number three, that staff approve final screening of the stairway to for the accessory dwelling, for the second story of the accessory dwelling. And number four, that the accessory unit should have corner boards.
I will second that motion.
He hasn't finished the motion.
Because
Based upon the finding of fact, the proposed project is consistent with the Hyde Park design guidelines of the City of Tampa for the following reasons: the massing, scale, and detailing of the proposed structure.
you have a second on the motion?
Do we need to amend that?
To do what?
I didn't.
He stated Oregon Avenue.
Did you say Orleans? I didn't get that.
I missed it too.
I was reading.
He just correct it really quick.
I was reading from this. Okay, to clarify the address, it's 821 Oregon Avenue.
Was there already a second to the motion?
Not yet.
I will second that motion.
All in favor, please state aye and raise your hand indicating so. Aye.
Aye.
Seeing the motion passes.
Thank you so much, Board. We
You're
really
very
appreciate it.
welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I wouldn't have known that you had it.
Spell proof. Spell check. And sometimes you can't rely on the computer, so you really gotta do it.
Nice catch.
Thank you very much.
I keep honing that into people I work with. I'm like, okay, so you might spell check once. Maybe twice, but you still gotta look at it and read it.
Oh, God,
Oh, my.
No. Right.
I tried.
Lights today, push down the padlock on my way.